everybody, welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 23 already. I think we are, 52% of the way through the year. I was listening to a podcast and they mentioned a Twitter account that every day just posts what percent of the year you're through. And I feel like that's a good constant context of like, oh yeah, time is passing. So I just started following that. Anyway, today is a regular live stream. We're going to be tackling questions from the audience about Cinema 4D. How is everybody doing? We got some people in Twitch. We got some people on YouTube. I hope everyone is doing well and you're having a wonderful day, doing cool work, making fun things. I'm just cleaning up my menus here a bit. Yep, cool. So, news. Well, first of all, everybody should definitely head on over to rocketlasso.com if you haven't already, and I'll have a link below. And scroll to the bottom and make sure that you have signed up on the newsletter so that you can get information about Rocket Lasso goings on, but especially plugin launches. And mostly, this is important because with any luck, if things go well, we will be launching a new plugin, a brand new plugin on next Wednesday. So exactly a week from today, it'll probably be a plugin live stream where we'll be tackling all sorts of cool new things you can do with the new plugin. That's the plan. There's a lot of work to do. We're working crazy overtime trying to get everything wrapped up, but it should be good. I'm excited. Can't do any hints about it today. There's just too much to that's not quite ready to fully show off yet, but it will be in a week. That's the plan. Okay, let's start covering the basics. Start getting those links together. If you're on Twitch, you can post a link. If you're on YouTube, you can't, but you can switch to the other one if you want. But you can still type out questions on YouTube. I like typed out questions. If you post a question, make sure I can see the artist or studio who made it. I have to be able to give credit, otherwise I won't tackle it, or it has to be like a way abstracted question. If it is a link, make sure you're calling out the time or the specific effect that you're interested in. Otherwise, I won't know what to focus on. Oftentimes there's a whole bunch of cool different things happening and we don't know which one it is. But we've already got a question popping in from Dean, so let's go and tackle that and we'll see how it goes. Switching to my desktop. Looks like I have the camera disabled in this one. Oh, there it is. Haha. Boing. All right. Let's see what we got from Dean. Pop this open. Mute the tab just in case. We got something from Getty Images. Oh, it's funny here. Well, it seems to be somebody's stock photography that they put together, where you get all these little swirls. I gotta say, at a glance, I'm thinking this is particle stuff. What's funny is there's a really good chance that these are just, that this is Cinema 4D and that this is X particles that we're seeing. It just has that feel. And something that's funny here on this big zoomed up image, you can see that they don't have quite enough subdivisions, and you can see, like, it looks smooth there, it looks smooth in the middle, but right here you can see how kind of low, there's not very many points on those. So it's just an interesting detail. I'm a little reluctant. We can tackle this type of question. I'll put out there, in general, don't link me to stock photography, or don't link me to CG stock stuff, because somebody's trying to make money from this. They have a concept here and they are trying to sell it. So I don't want to be like stepping on somebody's toes where they're trying to make something cool. So we're going to only tackle this in the most abstract sense. So I want to be able to give somebody direct credit. And, you know, it's like I won't tackle somebody else's tutorial because, hey, they have a tutorial. Watch their tutorial. I don't want to directly reference this. But the general kind of swirl look is definitely something that we can tackle in more of the abstract. So let's see what we can do. Oh, somebody says that there is a link to the name in the bottom right. Yeah, Yichayo? I'm not sure. Apologies for the pronunciation, but once again, we'll keep this a little bit more abstracted. But once again, that's somebody who's trying to make money from their artwork, and I don't want to extract. I don't want to render what they're doing redundant, so just keep that in mind. But in any case, let's just we can do this in a very different way that I don't think is any way derivative of that. In fact, we've seen that type of imagery before, so it's not super original, but. Let's see what we can do with fields, because there's a lot you can do with fields. And let's, I know we got a couple questions that popped in, but let's try and do maybe some slightly extra dynamic-y things. We could just do this with regular cinema particles, and maybe it would be a good idea to do that, but I'm feeling like doing something dynamic. So in this case, let's put this on some text. Let's open up a text spline. R for rotate, spin it, and lay it flat on the ground. I've always been kind of interested in the fact that there is no, oh wait, there is a plane. I keep forgetting. I keep expecting that parameter to be up higher. So yeah, let's lay it flat on the ground and type in something. Let's type in C4D. C4D. Center it, and it would be, I guess the best thing would be some sort of roundish font. A little bit rounder will help. It's not necessary, but I think it would make it flow a little bit smoother. Oh, here we'll do some Gotham rounded. Yeah, that's nice and rounded, so I like that. Okay, that is a bit of text. I'll make it a little bit larger, and then, as I said, I'd like to do dynamics, and you guys and gals probably know I like to work, if I'm going to be doing some dynamic things, I like to make it a cube that we tell to calculate as a sphere, so it's kind of like the best of both worlds. If we don't care about the specifics of the dynamics, it's a good way of having something really low poly that still visually takes up approximately the correct amount of space. I will drop the floor a couple of units. I will do 3 just to make sure it's not intersecting. There's a cube. Make the cube simulation rigid body. Tell the rigid body to be an ellipsoid, so it's essentially spherical. So it's going to be round and be rolling around. Yeah, so we should be able, let's make the floor dynamic. I'll just copy the tag there and then hit play, and pretty much nothing will happen. You can see them slightly rotating, so you know they're alive. Now I want this to run as quick as it can. I don't know if self collisions will do much. Actually, that's the whole reason to do this, is to have collisions. So we need more of them, but we don't want to go too overboard. So let's do, I don't know, 11 by 11. And spacing of, let's do 11 by 11. There we go. So we get a small cluster of them, and we're running super fast still, even with them all dynamic. So let's go 22 by 22. And yeah, that should be fine for now. All right. Spacing wise, I would like them to spread out a bit and scoot the texts to be a little bit more centered. Okay, that's the plan. So how do we make these start moving around or potentially doing some sort of swirling and whatnot? Well, that is going to be, of course, with Cinema 4D's newish field forces. So we got field force, and the field force wants to be fed something. That something will be the spline text itself. And with the spline text fed into the object tab, I would like to preview this. And going under display, I'll say I want to see all the dots. I want 0 on Y so that they're kind of flattened out and we can now see them kind of represented. I will, let's make these longer so hopefully you can see them a little bit. And you know what, I'll make the floor invisible just to make those more visible for you. And you know, if we wanted to see more of a preview, we could stretch this wider. It'll kind of decrease the resolution. We can see overall what's happening. And now, usually, the first thing we do when we drop something into the field force direction is we change this from along to radius. But in this case, we actually do want this to be along. But something you'll notice, let me show you very explicitly. You can see here that these are following along the line. But you'll see that they kind of fade out as they go because this has a range start of 0 and goes all the way up to a strength of 100. So you could crank up, I guess you can lower your range end to the bottom, but then it disappears. So my preferred method is grabbing the offset and cranking that up all the way. And now you see all of them are full length. Now, this is just a visual representation of the flow direction that we're going to get, but it does go out to infinity in every direction. So that should be fine. So reactivating this, that is now a field force. The field force is going to be applying a strength overall. So we can set this up to something like 55 is usually my go-to. It's gonna make the lines a lot bigger, but I think we're mostly done looking at those lines. So now let's see if these seem to travel in the right way. I imagine they're going to be overshooting. Also, let me save it. Episode 23, scene files. 1A. Let's just say follow text as a way of starting. So if I hit play, let's just see what happens. Well, immediately you see they do start all moving in their own direction, seemingly follow it. But like I said, they're probably going to have too much power. They're going to overshoot. And that's because the field force is just constantly applying a certain power, and there's nothing to slow these down, for one thing. So several things we could do. First of all, we could say, actually, don't just add to velocity, which is like wind or something, where wind is just constantly adding and adding and adding. Instead, we can say, no, no, no. Set an absolute velocity. And now all of them are forced to constantly move at exactly that speed, no matter what. So now they're not going to overshoot their position. But you see that they do lose a lot of life here. They're all doing the exact same thing. It's a little bit slow. Change direction is fun, but very specific. Change direction means they will continue with their current speed, and other things can add speed, but this is just changing their direction. So both of those being pretty cool. But I think add to velocity is one that's actually the most fun. Like, it's actually making them travel around and do crazy things. But we need to drain speed out. Now we can drain speed from them overall by two main means. Usually I go to something like a linear damping. So we can say, okay, linear damping, I would like you to have a lot, let's say like 99. So it's draining tons of energy out, and now you can see that they're escaping, but not nearly as fast. So you can see, and let's give ourselves a bunch more frames, 999. So you can see now that they kind of end up traveling around the entire thing because they still have that acceleration. So we need a second effect here of some sort, which is going to be attracting them towards the line. So that's my next thought. So back into the field force, under display, we'll turn that back on again. And we can take a look. Let's put the length back to 1. So these are all traveling in that direction. Let us, in the field force, add a second copy of the text. And this one, I will say I want to, and let's just focus on this one by itself. This one, I do want it to be based on the radius. Now, I typically will separate these out into two separate ones, one for radius and one for a long, but you can do a hybrid one where it does both at the same time. But I often will like modify the strength of one via the slider and whatnot. I just like separating them. Anyway, we've got this radius, and we can just crank that up like super far. And I mean, the radius can go as far as we want it to, and it's going to be constantly checking the direction. Now, I don't know if this attracts or pushes away, so let's just hit a couple of frames and see what happens. It looks like it's by default attracting towards the closest line. So if we hit play, you'd see all of them are getting attracted directly to the spline, which is great. You see it's instantly forming that letter, which is really cool. But now, the obvious thing is let's combine these two. Let's say that this is adding onto the previous one. So let's say add, and now there should be a rotational direction, and it's getting attracted to that line. So now we get the best of both worlds. We get these colliding and scooting in, trying to hang out. And what's really cool here, you can see that sometimes if they overshoot, they might escape one letter and get to a different one. So yeah, really fun combinations there. So you can see how those combined. Got these traveling along. Lots of things we can do from here. First of all, there's several things I would kind of like to do, to tell you the truth. Like, we went straight into that spline stuff, but let's even backtrack from that a little bit to get a little bit more of that swirl effect we were originally seeing. In the field force, let us turn off the text. So now there's no forces whatsoever. And start with a simple noise field. So let's, again, visualize the noise and increase the scale. And you'll see as I increase this that eventually we're going to see some uniformity. You see how we can actually see the pattern now? So that's exactly what I want. So now that we're seeing that pattern, we can animate. Well, first of all, let's just see what happens if I hit play. We still have a big energy drain, but we're going to see these kind of shoot off in particular directions, and they're going to be filling in the gaps between them. But then they're just going to stop. They're going to find these points of equilibrium where it's like these points said to push in, these said to push over, those said to push over. They get trapped. So typically, I'm going to say animation speed of, I don't know, 55. And now you'll see that that noise pattern is constantly animating, which is going to keep these all flowing around doing their own thing. So, or they're never going to get trapped in one spot because the animation is constantly going. They will find these points of equilibrium, but they'll keep on moving. Now, this will give us a decent speed hit, but here's a cool thing I really love doing with dynamics in cinema. I'm going to hit save real quick. There's an effect, and if you haven't played with it, you totally should, because it does so many cool things you couldn't really do otherwise. Under dynamics, for some reason it's under dynamics menu here, even though it feels like a force to me. Under dynamics, there's something called force. So what this force is doing is saying every single one of these dynamic objects is creating kind of its own little attractor. So with that in mind, let's turn off the field force and just see what the attractor does by itself out of the box. Hitting play, not much. It's really slow, so let's crank up the power. 10 times stronger. I haven't talked about it in a while, but always do an order of magnitude with these things because we don't know if the strength should be 0.1, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, a million. You just don't know. So always go times 10 or some huge increment, but immediately you see that these are beginning to kind of pull towards each other. And eventually, if we give them enough time, they're going to really clump together and probably all get attracted towards the center. So they're all getting attracted to each other right now, and that's the point of this. Now, what I would kind of like to do is the opposite. I would like these to all push away from each other a bit. So we'll give it, I'm going to go like overboard on the power here. So we'll do a strength of 55. And I want the radius to be a lot smaller. So the distance between, here, I'm just going to make a cube. So you can see, I would kind of like the distance they're trying to stay away from each other to be about what this cube is. And we can now see that that cube's about 20. So that will be the number I type in. So 20 is the inner distance. So I'll kind of split the difference. I'll say an inner distance of 10 and an outer distance of about 30. So 20 is right in the middle there. It's a little bit of a fall off. And right now the strength means that only some of them will attract each other. But right now they might be a little bit out of their range, so it might not do too much. And it's a small radius. We might end up tweaking this a few times. But what I really want to do is a negative attraction. But once again, these seem pretty... They're seemingly outside the radius, so I'm going to increase this, let's say 50 by 20, and see if that's enough to do something. Not much. That's surprisingly weak. Okay, I'm just going to keep on increasing until we start seeing an effect. Okay, when in doubt, use a big number, so I'm going to jump that up another unit. And now you can definitively see that like, everything's pushing away from each other. So we just had to be sure that it was actually doing something. So now maybe the strength was just kind of weak. So I'm going to pull this back. And they're not very close to each other, but you can definitely see that those are pushing away from each other. I don't expect that by itself to do that much. And then something I've been doing a lot more lately is just making sure I give myself little indicators. So like I'll type in negative force on there just so I know that that's a negative force. But now let's combine this with our random noise. So the idea here is that they are going to want to be flowing around, but they also want to avoid each other. So let's see how well those are combining. And yeah, right now you see how this is a big clump of them, but they're not on top of each other. So let's play around a little bit with these settings. So let's increase the radius a bit and increase the minimum a bit and see, yeah, there we go. Look, see as I change this, you see how almost they're filling up a lot more space. I just don't want them to be completely on top of each other. So these are now, yeah, they're avoiding being on top of each other. That's the point there. So now we got this random noise that's going to be constantly pushing them around. Now let's think about combining all of these things. So with our field force, that is some randomness, but let's go and turn I'll leave that as a normal max, put it on the bottom. And now we got our first text to make it flow around, and let's add that on top of that, and we'll make the next one, which adds on top of that. Don't need to display it anymore, I don't think. And then we have our negative force, which is pushing them all away, so they don't want to clump up too much on top of each other. And let's see what we get. So we get that random, which hopefully will allow them to flow back and forth. Right now, the attraction is really strong. Like they're very much getting attracted to the text, which is cool. But let's chill that out a little bit. First of all, I'm going to weaken the overall strength of this so that can slow down. And then we are flowing around the spline. Oh, no, this one's the attractor, which we should probably name the radius. So let's start pulling back on the power of that one. And yeah, as soon as I do, you see how they start spreading out from the line a little bit. They're still staying near the line, but they're not perfectly on top of it anymore. So let's just start that again and see what kind of effect we get. Yeah, so I think, yeah, if you squint your eyes or if I hide the text, you can definitely feel like the general shape of that text starting to show up. So we've got that idea. Now as these continue to layer up, how was I going to do that overall flow direction? Well, let's go to the next step here, which is just going to be taking our cloner and feeding it into a tracer. I'll move the tracer afterward because it calculates after. That's just an important thing with splines. Currently it's tracing paths, but it's also tracing the vertexes of those cubes. So I just want the center point, so I'll turn off trace vertices. And now we'll get a tracer line behind it. If we set this from end, then I can set this to something limited, let's say 33. Well, let's see what we get now. So now we've got lines, but because we have these, we have that this negative force pushing them away from each other. Do you see how we're like very distinctly getting a feel for the text now? You can definitely see the C, definitely see the 4, definitely see the D, because they're all separating out. If we turn that separator off, these would not separate out nearly as much as they are. Look at these really cool flows that like shoot out. As the random noise is affecting it slightly, you can see how some of those escaped and they're rejoining the stream, but you still get the overall feel of those individual lines. Hiding the text, we can see that you get a great look of this overall shape. And you can imagine that we could, there's so many things we could do. I mean, it just goes into, you start building rigs. But if we just made a spiral pattern, we might be closer to that original reference. You could put the spiral on top of all of this. We could also make a larger field of them that are traveling around a larger shape so that they might, you know, go near here. We could put some negative attraction here so everything can kind of flow around, but they avoid these certain points. There's a lot of combinations of things we could do as these would be flowing around, but they're dynamic, so they'll bounce off of each other and they'll have that negative attraction, which is fun. Again, that negative force is going to have a major effect on the visual of how they're behaving. So I'm going to, let's go overboard, and I'm going to, let's just type an extra 1 here, which should dramatically increase the radius. And as soon as I do, look at these explode away from each other. And now they're like, their midpoint. Keep in mind that the midpoint is going to be where this power is hit, I think. And, or maybe it's on the outer one. But in any case, you can see that everything's been pushed away from each other a lot more. If we start this over again, like, look how quickly, it only took like what, 10 frames before we could read the text already. And they're really pushing away from each other, but a bunch of them are kind of trapped because they're getting pushed from both sides. But look at how they eat more space up. You could leave the tracer to live longer. There's definitely things we could do where you could make these individual traced lines themselves something they get attracted to or avoided. It's a cool technique, but there's a lot, you'd have to do a lot of iterations to really make sure that it's working. But the point being is you can really feel this overall shape here. So I will give this a save, and then we'll continue on a, well, let's render it. No, actually, we'll save that. And first of all, let's render using built-in cinema stuff, because when it comes to splines, you get 2 main options in vanilla cinema. One is your hair, so I can create a hair material, and I can drop that directly on the tracer. And now Rick had mentioned, yeah, I guess it is true. As soon as you make a hair material, it makes a hair renderer. You have to make sure that that is indeed there and turned on. I thought it only happened if you made a hair object, but that's cool. Anyway, hair should now render, and hair is very quick to render. Let's give it a couple of settings. For now, well, let's give it a gradient, but let's go crazy. One of my new favorite colors is kind of, ooh, I do love olive green. Let's go from an olive green to this like this very yellow, yeah, this kind of bright lime green. So just a gradient there. I will turn off specular so that we're pretty much just getting the line straight across. And if you go under illumination, I always forget what the setting is. Is it diffusion? Yeah, if you drag your diffusion all the way down and the shadows all the way down, you can kind of get it to behave like it's luminant. So let's just see how that looks. Give that a save just in case. Hit render. Okay, cool. I forgot these are dynamic, so those will render. I don't want them to render. And let's turn off the floor. Now we hit render, and now we get our lines. Something that's cool with hair is you have built-in cinema, which is great. We've got a hue variation, saturation, and value. So let's just do, and a little bit goes a long way. So 5% variation on the hue, and you can immediately see we're getting some yellow ones and some bluish ones. But if you start pushing this pretty far, like pretty quickly, it starts getting into like pretty chaotically different ones. Typically, I won't change the saturation or the value much unless maybe we're in a grayscale situation. But yeah, you can see those lines. The thickness is determined by the root and tip. Typically, what I like to do is set these to the same number and then just control it via the spline. So what direction is this flowing? I think they're going around that way. So that's backwards. Let's do this and pull that down. So yeah, now those will travel around. And yeah, so we get those cool effects there. And you'll see here as I hit render, well, when I hit render, look how quick it's like almost instantly rendered. So let's go and let's make these trace for a little bit longer. tracer. We'll do 55, not too long, but just a little bit longer. And save. We won't save, but we will output to, that's fine. We're just setting up a quick test render. So yeah, that's all I need to do for a quick one. Let us send that to, rewind out of the way, save, picture viewer, and we'll just let this go a few frames. Now, if you, depending on what you're doing, you could always pre-roll that a little bit so that it's not going to start by beginning the drawing. And as soon as we've got 55 frames, then the tails are going to start erasing up towards the end. And I just love how the text instantly emerges from here. Now, keep in mind that I did the dynamic objects here, so we could do the negative attraction through the force that we used. But keep in mind that we could make this significantly more dynamic, or we could add additional dynamic elements in here, where if you wanted this text to be very clean, we could take that actual spline and extrude it upward and make it a collider body, so it would actually have something to be bouncing off of, and they would be trapped on the outside. We could also trap some on the inside if we wanted to, and that would, you know, it'd still be doing the same type of thing, but it'd have this invisible wall it couldn't get through, which would be pretty cool. It's not going to take too long before I run out of RAM for these all to be remembered, so let's hit play. And yeah, look how quick this renders because it's hair, which is just wonderful. I love splines. Splines in 3D, both in vanilla cinema and with third-party renderers, just give you so many cool options. And yeah, we get those morphing around. Let's see, what are some tweaks we could or might want to make here? I don't know, it's just working pretty well for what I was aiming for. You get all these lines flowing around. Whee! And then I was going to, let's save this, and then really quickly we'll do the redshift variation of this. So let's add in a couple, let this run just a little bit. We don't need much, we'll just get 55 frames, and then if anybody has any follow-up questions to this one specifically, let me know, but otherwise we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so I'll save that one as that, but now let's save version B_RS for redshift, and it is very, very quick to add some redshift stuff in here. First of all, redshift I think will acknowledge the hair tag. So if I were just to open up the redshift render viewer, let's hit go and see if we get anything. I don't know that we will. Okay, we don't get anything out of the gate because we have to add on a redshift object tag and say I want to render this as hair splines. The instant I do, you see it pops in. You can make a redshift hair material, and I think they specifically wrote this. Let me drop it on. Does it? Maybe I'm missing something. I thought that there was a very direct one. Yeah, see, I thought it was this, but maybe I'm applying it wrong. That this would, maybe it's only on an actual hair object, but it actually takes all the attributes, like they wrote the specific node so they could pull the attributes out from hair because they're so powerful. But I wasn't even going to spend much time on that because what I'd really like to do is just open up a brand new redshift material, and we'll drop that directly on, and it's going to just render whatever that is. So in that redshift material, we can type in anything that we want. So in this case, how about, actually, I don't know if the object color or random comes from that. We might need hair to do that. But anyway, we've got the color, so we can just go and make it kind of that yellow-green. And instantly it's going to turn on to that. We can add more or less reflection, which should be represented. I didn't put an HDR in here specific, but I thought there's some generic one. And the thickness here is controlled entirely via this tag. So we could say, hey, that's supposed to be up to 5. They get really big, and we can thin it down so they go thinner. You can change these to be something else, like capsules. So they're going to get some nice rounding where every tiny little segment's become its own capsule. And a capsule's good because they have those rounded edges. So it just ends up being, it looks like it's swept, but I think it's creating like a tiny capsule at render time for every single little individual point to point on every line, which just generally looks pretty cool. Now, as far as extracting color from this, I don't know that there is any direct way of doing it because, well, you might be able to do it from like hair or something. But let's feed in to the color channel, the color data, and we'll see if we can pull something out from it. So we could try grabbing the object color, but I think that'll just be gray. We could try the display color. That's just white. So yeah, those are kind of overall. Geometry ID. Yeah, that's just solid again. And yeah, that won't do anything. So, and that's because they're all the same. Having said that, I don't know, but if we were to grab a hair position, here, hair random color, I don't know for sure, but let's try dragging that in. Nope, that's still seeing them all as one. Yeah. I'm blanking on how to differentiate all of those. If somebody knows, use the vertex attribute node to get random curve colors. Thank you, Mr. Falcon. Let me see if that works. Was that the vertex attribute node? Is that this one? No. Vertex attribute. Bing. Out color. Let's just try plugging that in. Solid color right now, but let's go to attribute name curves. Oh, look at this. I didn't know this was here. Curve ID. There we go. I didn't even know that was there. That's very cool. Thank you very much, Mr. Falcon. That would have been useful to know for some of the Ricochet tutorials. So yeah, now this is giving us completely random colors, and we could map those and do whatever we want with them. Colors with alpha. Yeah, if we do with alpha, we could extract the black and white channels specifically. But yeah, that'll give you different colors, and those will, this is now kind of physical geometry, but it should render just as well. So let's try sending that to the picture viewer. Okay, I'll leave hair on, but let's change this to a redshift render. Under redshift, you can go to advanced, and what's cool is they changed it. They really simplified it. So now you can even go under advanced, and then there's just this singular threshold, which is the big one. So typically you can jump it up like a whole order of magnitude, or even 2 orders of magnitude, and just make it render really, really quick for a test. And that's pretty much all you have to do. So without changing anything else, let's just try sending out a redshift version of it. And you can see that it's going to be rendering that incredibly quickly. And considering how much geometry is actually being created here at render time, it doesn't have any effect on the viewport because of the way that's built. So it is, as always, really fun to render splines. Now, if we were telling this to render as hairs, they'd be going even quicker. But for now, you can see that is drawing them out. And pretty much every third-party renderer has some version of this. It's one of the reasons I'm so interested in splines. Somebody's asking how to do it in Arnold. I don't specifically know, but if somebody in the chat can shout it out, I'll make sure to shout it out if you answer. But would there be a way to have a single object returning multiple segments, like this tracer is returning whatever, like 400 different spline segments, and how would that interpret them? Or how could you make it? Oh, David, apparently I forgot to make the YouTube stream listed, so it's like hidden, so people aren't going to organically find it, but it's just my mistake. Nothing I can do about it now. But yeah, that's drawing this out. So I'm going to wrap this one up. If there is no specific follow-up questions about it, so feel free to repost your question if you have one. The step of binding your connectors to Geo doesn't seem to be working for me. Oh, you might be linking to my own video, so I'll go check that in a second. It's not regarding this. Is there any way to use the curl filter, which is the volume, inside of a field force? Lignazio, that is an excellent question, and I will attempt to show you. Because it's actually, there's a couple of really, really great features inside of the vector, the volume vector, that are not in field force. So we'll take a second and check that out. So we don't have too much rendered here, but you see that that's going to render out just as well. Not quite as quick as the hair, but like I said, if we had this set to redshift hair, it would be rendering super duper quick as well. And it's pretty cool. I like it. So we'll stop that and we'll try and answer this follow-up question, which is an excellent follow-up question. That is now saved as the redshift version of this. All right, so the question is, let's bring back these little fellas and turn off the tracer temporarily. Okay. We've got that random field. If we create a volume builder, there's a cool mode that we almost never use, which is called vector. If we're in vector mode, I can drag in a field, and the instant I do, you see we're going to get a giant cloud of 3D noise represented here. And it is now represented with this voxel size. So I can set that to 5. And now you see that there's way more. Now every 5 units in every direction, it's going to be increasing. And always remember when you're doing anything with a volume that this stuff is cubed. So changing this number to 5 is now a distance of 5. So of course, when you make this smaller, it's becoming more complicated. But it's not just a little bit more complicated. If we double this amount, which you'd think if we cut it in half, that would double it. But no, it doesn't double it. It's doubling it. So keep in mind the complexity you do when you tweak this number just a little bit. But anyway, you can see that we can drag this in and we get really cool vectors from that noise. Inside, we have several things that we can do, including a vector curl. So if we were to, I can't remember. Oh yeah, okay. So vector curl is very, very powerful. Let me try and visualize it properly. How can we visualize this properly? I haven't done this in a little bit. So let's drag in, yeah, if I drag in this text, you can see that it is doing a similar thing where it's pointing outward on every bit of text. This is a lot like the radius. Now, if we take this vector curl and put it above it, what happens? Okay, now you see that it has turned it and it's now flowing around the direction. But there are like some really interesting, crazy combinations we can do. If we were to combine these two, you can do things like add, subtract, or do a cross product of it. And there are some very specific combinations that I'm just not remembering too well that do some really cool effects. I'd actually have to watch my own video because I haven't combined these too often. But here is the cool thing about this is, well, first of all, you got to keep in mind that this is unlike the field force, which calculates out to infinity. This is not calculating out to infinity. This is only calculating what you see. What you see is what you get. So this random field is this box. Anything outside that box, it's not calculating. But what's cool is we can say the creation space inside the field. I can say whatever is below it. So now it's actually been applied everywhere to what already existed. And now we can see the result. We've got this curl like vector, which you, but even, oh man, see right here, we get like just this randomness inside the text. I forget some of the specific use cases of the vector field, but you can do some cool things with it. The point being, and hopefully this answers the question, we now have this as a series of vectors, and field force can be fed this. So we'll just turn off everything kind of. I'll turn off the negative force, and then the field force will just turn off, off, off. So there's nothing here. Drag the volume builder in, and we can bring it in, I think, as a volume object. Yeah, I think it's volume object. And now it is sampling all of these vectors. Those have now become the directions. One of the problems is it can run a little bit slow. I don't think it's so slow that I'm scared to hit play, but yeah, I always hit a few frames forward just to make sure that it's not taking like 2 minutes to calculate a single frame. You do see it does feel significantly slower. And the field force, it looks like it's just a little bit weaker overall, so I'm just going to dramatically increase the strength. And yeah, we can now start seeing these moving around, and you see how a bunch of these aren't moving at all because they were outside of that vector and they're just not getting anything applied. But you can directly drag your volume builder vector into a field force, and it's now reading that. If your resolution is really low, what happens is this essentially you can imagine them being inside of a box. So there's 8 vectors around it. So there's like 4 above, 4 below. And wherever it is in the position between them, it's averaging them. So it should be able to travel between all of those. Still pretty weak. I'll make it a few times stronger. But yeah, there's all sorts of really cool curl noises in there. And I recommend checking out what version is it? Is it the R22 version? Maybe it's S22. Maybe it's even older. I can't remember when Field Forces came out. But I go into some really cool curling. Like the curl really unlocks some cool twisty, turny, travel-y things. In fact, if you want to make something very similar to this effect, check out my What's New video for that version of cinema, because there's a very direct way of getting those types of swirls going. I'm just blanking on the specifics of it. But yeah, that's how you feed it in so it actually has an effect on things. I'll save this as the third file. Let me delete Redshift, so anybody who doesn't have Redshift won't trip over that. Back to standard. I suppose as context, when it comes to me saving these files, if you're supporting on Patreon, then you get these. Hang on, this is follow text underscore volume vector. If you're supporting on Patreon, you can get access to these scene files after the episode airs, which is pretty cool. In addition, if you do want to follow on Patreon, I suppose I should. I'm terrible at doing this type of thing, but I'm going to link to the Rocket Lasso Patreon. If you do support, You get discounts on plugins as well. And as I mentioned, we just came out with Ricochet not too long ago. And we are coming out with a brand new tool in a week. So if you're supporting on Patreon, you get discount codes for the amount that you're supporting on Patreon for the tool. So it's actually a huge savings. Anyway, that should wrap this one up. Let me scroll up, and there were more questions popping in. Okay, Void is saying that he had a question about my wacky waving inflatable tube man video, which is fun, and it's pretty old. It was actually my brother's idea for that tutorial. I was like, I need a tutorial idea. And he's like, what about a wacky waving inflatable tube man? I was like, that is an amazing idea. Anyway, and I can pull the video up in a second, but your question is the step, well, yeah, so maybe something is broken in it. The step of binding the connectors to the geometry doesn't seem to be working. I haven't watched that tutorial since it was new. And I know I built different rigs, so man, I don't have an easy answer for that. They were fully dynamic. Yeah, binding the connectors to the geometry doesn't seem to be working. You know what, Void? Actually, I might have an idea of what you're talking about. Let's see how quickly we can do something simple here. I will make a capsule, and we're going to minimize the geometry because we don't need much. And it's 200 tall, and that should be about 50 of it is taken up by the caps. I'm not sure. So that becomes a dynamic object. So let's say it is simulation collider body. So that one's not dynamic. Copy and paste. And this one, yeah, let's see. Okay, move up exactly 100. Yeah, 100 will match them. So that becomes the point where they pivot around. That's what I want it to do. And then that one, I will add a simulation rigid body. Those two need a connector between them. So adding a a simulate dynamics connector will move that connector up 50, which is right in between them. And that is currently a hinge connector. I will change it to a ragdoll or ball and socket. Both are valid here. I guess you need a direction, so one might be better than the other, or even a cardan might be a good idea so they don't twist. I haven't done this in a little bit. Let's try a cardan. I don't know if that's a good idea, but we'll try a cardan. It's a little small, so I'm going to scale it up, and you can see the double orientations that it can bend on. So if I spin that negative 90 degrees, I'll move that as a child of this top one and say I want to link the top one to the bottom one. That automatically makes them ignore collisions with each other, which hopefully means I can get play, and the top one, if maybe given a little bit of force, will flop over. Let's add in a simulate forces turbulence just to put a little bit of wind in here. And yeah, you can see it moving, and then bloop, flops over, okay? This connector, we don't want it to bend too far, so let's attempt to limit them. I've always had some trouble with this, with limiting where they could bend. So let's see, yeah, see immediately that's flipping out. One thing is, and I don't know if that's going to happen here, but you don't actually want your connector to be exactly where your axis is, although I guess it isn't exactly where the axis is, so that might be fine out of the gate. I have always had trouble conceiving of what these are supposed to do. These are blockers. Those block the movement. Currently, you can see that this yellow one is up into the air, meaning it can flop left and right, but this bottom one is on the bottom, meaning it can flop those two sides. Which one is the blue one? Not that one. So I'm going to attempt to flip this around to negative 180. Does that not work? I'm going to increase this to 180 and go to 360. Now the blocker for that is still below. See, yeah, this one just isn't intuitive to me. You can immediately see it kind of freak out. So yeah, it's almost as if it's supposed to still be up there. So that one is free and that one is free, but you're going to immediately see it flip out again. I'm just not going to worry about the blocking. In fact, I'm not going to worry about the rotation at all. We're going to simplify this concept. back to ragdoll. Ragdoll is fine. Don't worry about limiting it. We've just got this cone. So if this goes around to negative or positive 90, not 90, please. Okay, so the cone's up there. So you picture it like a dog cone so that it can't nibble any surgery it's had. That can only tip over so far. Let's make sure that that does work. No, because I made it a child of itself. Maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe that should be a child of the bottom one. Nope, it's still moving with the top one. Let's try changing the linking order between those. Seems better. Bunk. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we've linked into the bottom, and now it's on the top. Maybe we could put it back. If that was the problem, let me try very quickly putting it back to the cardan, and then putting this back to negative 90. And I just want to see if it flips out. Yep, still flips out. I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, back to ragdoll. So now you can see that this can fall over, plunk, and it can't escape the cone no matter what direction it blows. Let's make the turbulence be way stronger. Give ourselves a few extra frames. So that can now flop over, and the wind is allowed to spin it around, although it's not doing a great job of spinning it around. It has no scale, so I guess that makes sense. Bonk. Whee. Okay, so you can see how that can move around. Cool. Now, in order to repeat the process, it's not hard, but it's not quick. You'll see that this connector as a child of this object is at 50. So I'm going to drop in here, and it's now at negative 50, but we want to be, again, at 50, which will push it up 50. This one needs to move up exactly 100 units. And now that will link to whatever it's on as the top one and whatever it's going to as the secondary one. So now we've got a second linkage. Let's double check that that worked. Yes, it did. Now let's duplicate it again. Now the rig I just made here isn't simple. Usually we can do a really nice doubling trick. We'll have to manually do it a little bit more. Once again, the tutorial probably covers this better. But we'll do the same process again. Duplicate. I'll make another capsule and another one of these. And again, that goes to 50. And this one goes up to 100. After I get a couple of these, we can probably do the doubling trick. That'll be the upper, that will be the lower, and we'll immediately make another one. Yeah, that goes up one layer. Usually I do it the opposite way. Just make sure that worked. Yep. I don't want to manually do it, but the way this rig is built is always referencing the one above. I guess if the capsule is there, maybe I can do it. Let me see. Copy paste. There's two of them, so I'll move it up 200. Those should be related to each other. This one needs to be related to itself, and then the new one. Did that work? Dang it. Oh, wait, actually, it probably did. This top one just has a connected to nothing. Yeah. Okay, cool. That worked. So I just have to remember to turn off top one. So now we can do the doubling. So I'm going to copy all these, copy paste. Move it up. We just have 4 of them, so now we move up 400. And now that one is connected to itself, and now the next one, the top one will lock it, but let's ignore that. And we'll make one more through our doubling method. So again, move that into position, move it up 800. Boink. And now that is connected to 8, which then connects to 9, and then the very final one just gets turned off because it would be connected to nothing. And let's make sure that that is all working. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, very cool. So now we got a pretty straightforward, simple, dynamic chain working just fine. Now, if this was going the wacky, waving, inflatable arm like technique, I would put, honestly, I'd probably turn off gravity entirely and then make a new force to simulate the gravity. I don't like using gravity itself. I like making a wind. Aim the wind on Z+, so that's aiming straight up. And then the wind can be told to be 40, and that's exactly gravity, but pushing upward. So now you'll see that there's a turbulence, which is blowing these around. But in general, there's a wind saying, no, push upward. And it's pretty amazing, but almost immediately we're getting a wacky, waving, inflatable tube man type of vibe from this. If we were so inclined, even at this step, which I should probably save. We could potentially put some arms on this thing in a not overly complicated way. I'm not going to scale them any differently, but we'll make them a bit stumpier. Copy, paste. The important variable here is that this is the pivot point. So I'm going to hit Alt-G to put a null. Pull that out. Whoa, pull that out. And then make all of those a child of that null. I'm trying to do it methodically. So that is where they should pivot from and be connected to. So if I rotate that 90 degrees, and then it needs to move over apparently 100. I like using these clean numbers because it's very obvious how far that should move over just visually. I guess I might collide with its neighbor. We'll figure that out in a second. And where do we want that connected? Probably a little bit higher. So I'm going to hold down Shift and move it up exactly 200. So those already are interconnected to each other, but not to wherever they're going to go here. And you know what? I'm going to move, oops, don't scale. E for move. And let's move it over another 100 just so it's not going to be colliding with like the one above and the one below. And I will move it up an extra 50 so it's in the center of that one just to make things a wee bit cleaner. All right. So it's currently not connected to anything. So, and like literally there's nothing to be connecting it. So we need to find what we want to be connected to, which is going to be this one. And we'll just call this one arm connector. And it needs another connection. So making a duplicate here, we'll just call this arm 1. Spin that 90 degrees. It probably moves to 0. So right in the center of it. Yep, makes sense. And I'll even move it 50 to the outside. So it's in the correct spot there. And that is going to connect from arm connector, which it is, to the beginning of the next arm, which is number 17 here, which I should probably name arm 1. Okay, let's save and then do a frame forward, make sure everything's fine. Okay, so now, yeah, look, that is now properly connected in that spot. So assuming that all went well, let's duplicate arm 1, copy paste, and we'll call it arm 2. Rename this one arm 2. And let's see, what do we got to do? We got to spin it 180. And everything else is pretty self-explanatory. We'll scoot that over by even increments until it looks like it's visually on the correct other spot. Expand it again. Let's go find our arm connector one here. Make a duplicate of that. Call that one arm 2. Spin it 0 degrees. Scoot it until it's visually aligned, which is 100 units. That links from arm connector to arm 2. That should be all we need to do for that. And if we play, there we go. Now we've got 2 dynamic wacky arms flailing around, doing their own thing. Now, there's a lot of tweaks you can do on this thing overall. But oh, it's so great because now you see those arms don't want to collide with each other, so they are actually properly avoiding. Those have a lot of weight. They're really tugging up in the air. So what I probably do, I'm going to hold down Control or Command as I click on the expand button, which will collapse all of them. So now it's really easy for me to grab the dynamics tags. With these dynamics tags selected, I'm going to say that those just aren't as heavy. They're a lot weaker. So under mass, we can say a custom density. And at 1, they're still identical. But if we start lowering this to, say, 0.2, they're only 20% of the weight of the other ones. Like these are now really heavy, and those are weaker. So those are way more at the whims of what that arm is doing. Actually, I can probably show you this pretty clearly. So you can see right now that the main body of this is very coherent. You can see it kind of feels continuous. If I were to tell these arms, like, no, you're way heavier, so I'm going to double their density. Those are now stronger. And now you're going to see what feels like these arms are really pulling around the top half of this. It's like the arms are dictating what's happening. So if we make the arms not as heavy, they are having an influence, but nowhere, they're only having 20% influence on it, where now the body has most of the work. Now, having said that, there's several things you could do. First of all, we've got this wind, which is pushing everything up. And let's move the forces all the way above. We could probably, that would probably be a good idea. Let me see if we can, I don't want to break anything because it's working pretty well. I will save that. I'm going to attempt to move a dynamics tag onto these parents and then delete all the children. And we'll see if we can get that to filter down, because then we only have to change 2 tags, which is nice. if this works, we can say, yeah, it's already inherit tag apply to children. That might be all we need to do. Yeah, okay, cool, that worked. So now we only have to change these 2 tags and we can have the whole thing collapsed. Technically, we should probably do that with the rest of it as well. Let's stay organized. Body. Select everything. Drop it in the body. Collapse it all, expand. Steal one of the tags and delete them from everything except for the bottom one. The bottom one needs to keep its own tag. So I'm not going to hit save, but let's make sure that that worked. Seemingly, yes. Cool. Now I will save. Okay, so now we've just got 3 tags to worry about. So I could say, hey, all 3 of you tags, under your forces, currently it's going to include every force that there is. I'm going to say, no. I want you to only include certain things. So in this case, I'm going to say include, I'm going to say all 3 of them should see the wind, but I'm going to only tell the body to have the upward wind. So that means the arms are free to just do whatever they want. So now we have different forces depending on what part of the body we're looking at. So now the body wants to stay upward, but now you see the arms have become way more noodly, where there's kind of wiggling around doing whatever they want. So that's a really cool way of separating out these forces to do to do unrelated things. For instance, we could put a wind that is actually a physical child of the main body here, and that wind could be blowing outward, telling one of the arms to kind of be straight in general. And we could tell, we could just apply different forces. We have one arm generally trying to go upward and one arm trying to generally aim downward. We could put different forces on every single one of them and have them aim at a particular spot. A lot of things we could do here. But in general, those are working pretty well. I mean, even here, yeah, there's an overall wind. If you've probably seen stuff before, but I typically like making 2 turbulences. One is the turbulence small and the other is the turbulence large. So let's do that. Unfortunately, now that these are different, these tags have different setups, we do have to drag the things in individually. So I'm going to drag in the turbulence large individually into each one of them. Okay, so turbulence large is going to have a very large scale, and I just want to see what that does by itself. So here's our large one. It is not as large as I want it to be, so we'll go even bigger. What I want is, I want to see a lot of uniformity in what's happening. You see, this whole thing overall is doing very uniform things. Now we can turn that off and try the small one. And the small one, actually small is probably pretty small already, so that's fine. So now that's doing these tiny little individual movements. So now we can kind of control those individually, where we get really big movements and then smaller movements. Because there's 2 of them now, I might lower the strength a bit. Whoa, yeah, they're getting real wacky. Yeah, so that's already working great. I'm quite fond of the way that is going. Maybe we need a little more upwards wind just to make sure it goes there, but it's certainly getting super wacky. So I just want to throw that out there as a basic overall concept. Now, as far as rigging the joints up, actually, what was your specific question? The connectors to Geo don't seem to be working. Now, unfortunately, we didn't worry about these spinning one way or the other, so everything could twist. So I'm not gonna be able to cover it super well, and then here's a problem. And maybe I don't remember how I did it in the tutorial, but in the past, Cinema let you use anything as like the skeleton. But I think in a certain version, they're like, no, you can't do that anymore. And I don't know why they changed it. Maybe it confused people or something, but let's keep this clean. I will make an end side, lay it flat on the ground, feed that into an extrude, turn off auto so it actually goes upward, and let's have this go up exactly as tall as our character, which should be even increments, so right around there, which is 1/700. Okay, that is that. T for scale. Few extra subdivisions. Think. 12 is a fine number. No caps, please. Bink, bink. And how many steps do we have going up? This claims 17. Usually it's one higher or one lower than that. So let's say subdivision. Let's actually hit NB. No, NB. Actually, I'd like to see it fully X-ray from the side. Oh yeah, the ground one's through the ground, but let's not worry about that. It's funny how from the side view they just look like spheres, even though it's just the top and bottom of different capsule shapes. But anyway, it said 17. Let's try typing in 17. Whoa. Oh, not 117. 17. And you see how, okay, actually 17 was the correct number in this case. You can see it's exactly putting one subdivision in between every one. That's what I wanted. So it doesn't have to be exact, but that does help. Okay, so now that is a bit of geometry. I don't remember. We probably have to make it editable. So I will put that into a null. And I'll add a recall tag on there. That's a plugin that we make, but that's going to store all that information. I can make this editable now. Don't need the selection tags. I'm going to attempt to bind this directly. I don't think it's going to work. Save that again. We should start saving this as the next version. Character. Bind. Oh, it does say it bound it. So you can see the capsules got fed in as where the joints would go. Don't know if it worked or not. See, it doesn't seem to be working. In the past, I feel like that would have worked. But sadly, it does not. All right, so because that doesn't work, and like I said, this is probably going to twist around. I wish it wasn't, but I didn't set it up to not. We have other options we can do. Here's two different options. Let's see if we can get them both working. First of all, we could convert these to joints, and I think we can do that really quickly. If I select all the capsules, we go to character, it's got this wonderful convert menu, and I can say convert to joints. And as soon as I do, it has now made a identical hierarchy to what we had. So let's go to, yeah, the top goes into that one, and each one just goes into the next. Oh yeah, this is not going to work as well as I was hoping. But we might be able to do my secondary method right away. Okay, I was going to say we can link them via a pose morph, so we could just like take the identical hierarchy and link them, but they're not identical hierarchies. They are like a giant unrelated stack. And because of this giant unrelated stack, the hierarchy node's not going to work. Instead, we'd have to put individual PSR tags, or now it's called transform. Put a constraint tag set to transform linked to the individual body parts. I want to not do that if we can get away with it. So as an alternative, let's see if this works. I'm going to, yeah, we can do this. I'm going to make a tracer. This tracer will be set to, well, what do we got? We got to feed it something. I'm going to lock it and then select all the capsules and drop them all in. It's tracing vertices. We don't want that. So don't trace vertices. What I would like to do is connect all objects, I believe. Don't know for sure that that worked. Let's hide all the geo that's blocking us. Yeah, you can see I've now got a straight line traveling straight up. With any luck, if I hit play, that line is moving exactly like the tube was. So if that indeed is working, technically we don't even need these capsules because, or these joints. I might end up using them, so I won't delete them, but let's hide them away for now. Now, with this tracer, yeah, really simple to feed that a sweep and another end side, the radius of which should unlock. Radius is probably 50, and we'll give it 12 sides again. And yeah, that should just be following the sweep around. And yeah, now we have geometry. Now, like I said, I wasn't taking twisting into account. The tracer's going to do a good job of like making it a coherent thing up and down, but it's not going to stop it from spinning on the base. So we're ignoring that element of it. This is not supposed to be a full-on tutorial. I was just covering some of the overall techniques. But yeah, that is a method for translating a series of connectors, like geometry and connectors, into a spline that's now feeding the overall tube. And then if that's not smooth enough for you, in the tracer, there's a very handy type, and we can change this to something like B-spline. Turn on, not close spline, turn on intermediate points, and I can say something like a uniform subdivision. And we don't need too much. Even the one extra segment is subdividing one extra time in between each one, but you can add more. And you'll see that we get extra subdivisions, making it even smoother between. So just a nice smooth B-spline interpretation between each of them. And now we've got an actual tube, but keep in mind, that is entirely driven from dynamic objects, so they cannot pass through each other. Now, what's really cool about building, I'm just going to have some fun with this rig now that we've built it. And you could do this same technique with the arms and whatnot. We're not going to worry about that. But something that is cool is, remember we were talking about that force? We can go back to our simulate dynamics force, and this works on these as well. So we have to individually apply it to our 3 tags. And this is going to look weird. I'm aiming for it to look weird. But if we hit play, it's not going to do too much right now. First of all, let's just make him like crazy strong. Okay, that's what I was expecting to happen. Now that I've increased the strength of this a bunch, you see all of these individual dynamic objects are attracted to each other. So the whole thing is just like curling up like he's scared. How weak can we go and still have them be attracted? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Look, no. And he's just curling up. It's so adorable. Like, that's so much fun. Using the forces is really cool. And yeah, so he's going in all sad, but we can weaken that, and he's probably going to slowly be like, no, it's okay. Now I do have a little bit of strength there, so like you see the arms are still attracted to the main one. This is respecting the mass, which means the body is attracting those 5 times stronger than it's attracting itself. So that's why the arms are still hugging it. So it's kind of fun that that's like a variable we can play with. So here the arms are probably going to hug it again eventually. Yeah. But if you type in something higher like 11, then the body is strong enough to attract itself and curl up. Put that to 0, and now they're all free to do whatever they want. So it's back to just flailing around. But then you can also type in a negative number, and now they're negatively attracting, which in theory is going to try and straighten them out a little bit more. Like, these arms don't want to get too near each other. So just by having that there, they shouldn't ever bend too sharply. And I don't think the body will bend too sharply either, because this is really stopping it. And it's got pretty big radius. If we make it even stronger, I think we'll be able to, yeah, you can see how these arms are like really trying to straighten themselves out, because they're all trying to push away, and the furthest away they can get is directly opposite each other. So yeah, just stylistically, look how easy it is to change the way this looks. So going from it trying to stay away from itself to just being like, no, like looking really smooth and whatnot. Like, it's just a great effect overall. Keep in mind, it's all there. It's all dynamic. So we could make a floor. I just gotta remember to make a new file and set that as my default. You know, I keep saying that and I never do it. So I'm gonna open up a new file and turn on environment, and then let's override, save that file. Oops. And go into my Maxon folder, up to my program files, go into 24. Here's my new.c4d. I'm going to override that. And now when I open up a new file, oh, it's not letting me save in there because it's write protected. I'd have to save that. Dang it. Okay, I'm going to do it because here we are talking about it. I want to do it. So I will just go into episode 23, scene files. I'll save this as new.c4d. And now that I've done that, I can go into my file structure. I'm doing it currently off screen until I get the right folders open. And back to my Maxon folder, back to my program files, back to Cinema 4D. Okay, so now you can see that I've got my Maxon folder, and here's my scene files for this episode. And now if I drag this over, yes, go ahead and replace it. Yes, continue. Okay, cool. Now that has happened, now when I open up a new file, I have updated, so I did just open up a new one. Now you'll see, hopefully, that my environment is turned on by default. So now I don't have to keep on saying, I got to remember to turn that on. Anyway, now the floor will show up. If we make the floor dynamic, then now it can't collide with that. There is a collider body that might be intersecting with it, but that doesn't matter. And yeah, now that can't escape through the floor because there's actually physically a floor there. Let's turn off the upward wind, and now it's kind of free to do whatever it wants. If we turn off the force now this is purely at the whims of wind without anything pushing it upward, so it's probably going to scrape along the ground and just do that type of thing. Based on the way the spline works, especially with it being a B-spline, let's say that you didn't want this ground one to be bending around. What you could do is make several more linkages down below. In fact, that's a good way of doing this. Because we're on a tracer spline, I could just make a new null. And if I just move this null 100 units down, I could just go into that tracer, and that's the first one. So I'll just make that null be the very first object in that list, and you see it's now linked to something even further down. So now we've got an extra one that's got nothing to do with dynamics, but that's going to keep this ground one looking pretty level. If it doesn't look completely level, you could do something like lock the upper one. So if you have 3 points locked in a row, that should make the center one look like it's not moving. But you can see how easily you can add things into the tracer and, you know, not worry about the rest of it. It just kind of works. But yeah, once again, the ability to like turn this wind on, to turn the force on, make it go in, make it go out, make it behave however you want it to. It just opens up a lot of fun possibilities for a wacky, waving, inflatable tube man. I like it. But anyway, I'll give it a save. Again, these scene files are available on Patreon if anybody likes reverse engineering like I do. But let us see if there's more questions. Yeah. Oh, I use this type of rig for everything. I did. I haven't tweeted this out yet. It's in my list to tweet out. Let me see if I can find it. General notes. Tutorial. Computer. Oh, there it is. So, I'm gonna open. Copy the link. So, some years ago, I helped out with a project when Ghostbusters 2016 came out. There was going to be a company that was in charge of all of them, and I was involved in, essentially it was going to be like, the company is going to be called Ghost Corps, like Ghost Corporation, and there was the logo for the company. And what's crazy is they actually released it publicly. So here it is on Facebook from Ghost Corps. So I worked with my friends at Filmograph, and I did 2 things for this project. They bought a ghost trap from, you see this ghost trap? They bought this off of a Turbo Squid or something. They got the model, but I retextured the entire thing to make it way more realistic. Also, this is not third-party renders. This is Vanilla Cinema physical renderer. So I did that, but then I also did the proton beams. So you see these beams traveling around and like wrapping up the letters? Like I designed those, and those are entirely a very different but similar rig to what we just made. These are a series of interconnected dynamic objects that are attracted to the letters. And so their attraction to the letters actually wraps it around in like a really fun dynamic way. And so yeah, totally, this is a technique that is applicable in a lot of different things. In fact, I did I think a SIGGRAPH presentation about the basics of this. Pretty cool. I like it. But yeah, it's really powerful technique. And yeah, once you have a spline, a line or a spline, it's really easy to like texture it up and layer it up and make it do whatever you want. You know, having a couple of like displacement layers. In fact, that's even what I did, like just to push this technique a little bit further. Yeah, so that is tracing this layer, but now, just for fun, imagine we trace that, and now let's make a duplicate of that tracer. Actually, we'll make a duplicate of the entire sweep. And we could just displace this secondary one somehow. So let's just throw in actually we'll just do this is gonna look a little bit choppy, but if we just throw in a random effector and tell that to be a point deformer, you can see how it's now deforming those points off to the side. So if we just pull back on the strength of that, we can get a secondary beam and shrink that one up a bit. It might, like I said, it might be a little twitchy when we hit play. Actually, shockingly stable. So yeah, you can see how that's actually being decently stable. Okay, as soon as it started bending at a certain degree, it started freaking out. But you can see how quickly you might be able to emulate something like that. If we were worried about the twist, that might fix this. But yeah, taking that and animating it via some noise gives it, actually, if I remember correctly, because that was being a problem, I independently made like a long beam that was straight and then spline wrapped it onto the dynamic spline just so that it was stable. But yeah, just throwing it out there, some crazy proton beams, which was fun to do. It was a very fun project. Anyway, let's see what we've got in the dynamic tag. give them linear velocity. I'm not sure what you're meaning. Linear velocity. Yeah, so anyway, that wraps up that one. And yeah, you could totally do this technique for balloons. In fact, it's kind of on pause. What's funny is like I have so many projects and so many different things I focus on. Let me pop open this balloon thing. I haven't even gotten to tease it out. I am planning on making, well, I was hoping to team up with some people. Actually, I guess I did show some of this, but I was hoping to team up with somebody and do like a tiny, not a short film, but like a little like animation with a story. And where would that be hiding? There's the balloon files. Let's see how quick this is. Yeah, well, anyway, yeah, well, this should kind of work. Yeah, you can see here, I've got a single balloon, and there's a similar technique, and it's actually making it so the string is holding the balloon. But then, let's see, yeah, so, but then you can build cloner rigs where this is running in real time, and those are actually strings actually holding the balloons. And then you have the ability for like wind to blow them around and do everything. Of course, once you push the number kind of past that, you quickly get out of the real-time environment. Although, wait, oh, here's one. Let's see if it works. Yeah, I was going full dynamics here. But if there was enough balloons, they're on a dynamic object, and that cube is actually physically holding them to the ground, which is just so much fun. So if I say a custom density, and let's set that down to, I don't know, 0.1. Yeah, now you see that it's light enough, and the balloons pick it up because it's all dynamic. It's super fun. This is not the files where I had the animations, but like some of these will probably go like insanely slow. Oh, now it's attached to a guy. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, I have some plans for this, but it's not out there yet. But yeah, I had some crazy animations where I just pushed it a bit further, but I don't, those are probably in a different exploration folder instead of, these were in a live stream I did, in a bonus live stream. Anyway, let us tackle some more questions. Excellent. Burnwolf is asking about something that was made in Houdini, but is it possible to do in C4D? Those are some of my favorite questions. Boop. By the way, nobody steal the balloon idea for any posts until I've gotten to do my version of it. Elegant cloth. Let me see. Okay, it looks like it's just images. I thought that'd be an animation. So, elegant cloth from Vinicius Arujo, Vinicius Arujo, probably butchering it. Now the poster said that this was done in Houdini, possibly in a. Let me get my chat back. Possibly. Part of the X-Bullet teaser that was just released, so I'm not sure. But yeah, you get all these really cool sheets going, and visually, I don't see any overlaps. I don't see anything here that we couldn't do, but it wouldn't be the simplest thing because there's a lot going on. Well, I mean, honestly, to me, it just looks like a bunch of layered up paper. So it more goes to how well your dynamics allow you to scrunch everything together. Who made this? Oh, wait, I forgot that we said the name. So yeah, very cool. And it's kind of got this transparency plastic look to it, if you're asking about the render style. But I mean, the basics of what I would do is pretty straightforward, like just spending a little bit of time with some nice cloth, some soft body cloth. So simulate soft body. And actually, we've done several things along these lines. So let's see how well we can do it quickly. First of all, your point count is going to be very important. We'll keep it low because we're on a live stream. We'll do 20, which is obviously not very high. And then for scrunching purposes, the easiest way we've kind of found to do this, we did do in one of the live streams a couple months ago, we did find a really cool new technique. Maybe it was that same, it wasn't the field force. Oh, I think I remember what it was. Yeah, I do remember what it was. What it was feeding the cloth into itself in the field force, and it worked. Field force, view the cloth, and I want to view that as points. We could do points. We could do as a surface. Points will be self-attracting. Maybe that's what we want. So if I increase that, every point should be attracting or pushing away every other point. And I think the one thing we had learned is that it needed like just a hint of turbulence to get it kick-started. And then once it's kick-started, it would go. So let's just put in a little bit of very weak turbulence. And okay, well, let's turn off several things we need to do. Let's turn off gravity. Field force is quite weak, so we'll put that up at least to gravity strength. Oop, and it flies away. Whee! Yeah, it's still flying away. Maybe this should be on surface. So now it should be attracting. Actually, those were probably negative now that I think about it. Direction, invert direction, or don't invert direction. Yeah, now it's stable. So now if we turn on the turbulence. Turbulence with very small scale, a little more power. Field force stronger, please. You see it kind of twitching. It's fighting. It's fighting. Let's try putting these back to points. I'm just curious. Layer points. It's hard to tell. It definitely feels like it's fighting itself a bit. There might be additional layers to this. Maybe it doesn't like seeing itself directly, but dynamics often will show up if fed into a connect object, and that's what's fed in. Still fighting us. Not a problem yet. Surface, I'm not sure which one is better. You can see it going like, no. What element did we have? What are we missing? I mean, the strength is getting like cartoonishly high. I'm going to weaken the connections here. I'm going to say that it's very bendable. No, that's not making much difference. And the damping, we'll weaken the damping as well. Now it's all very vibraty. Yeah, the self-attraction, I'll have to go watch my own video to remember how we did it, because it was really neat what we had gotten it to do. Oh, well, I set the volume. Oh, there is no volume, so now it's just not doing anything. Maybe there was even like an inner dimension. That doesn't make sense to me, though. Like maybe we have to remap it. Curve, there's a strength, and if I weaken it at the point, no, that's where all of them are, so it just goes away. Okay, well that doesn't work. Or I'd have to go look it up. It would work, but I just don't remember. Anyway, we'll go back to the simplified version. So I'm gonna make a sphere, scale it up, make it dynamic simulation collider body. It will see the entire mesh as a moving mesh, and it will be keyframed at 0, and we'll go all the way up to 45. And at that point, it shrinks to something reasonable, like that. And now we make it invisible. So now, if we hit play, that should be forced to, you see it's like forcing it to compress inward. Crunch. So if that's the concept, which is pretty straightforward, let's try putting that into a cloner. Linear, and put as much separation in as we need. Those should collide with each other. Hit play, and crunch, 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 crunch. Yeah, and we start, you know, they're starting to layer up. It's working quite well. And those things we were looking at were very abstract. I'm going to weaken or make the scale a little bit larger so we can get some randomness, but I don't want too much. And we just let those crunch into whatever relatively small scale. I feel like those might be escaping. Yes, they're very much escaping. They're escaping because this is probably scaling down really quickly. And two things. One, we could increase our sets per frame, which might stop it from escaping. I would like to add a render display lines. So now we can actually see it shrink in. But this type of scaling, yeah, it's not unusual for objects to escape through just because of what it's doing. So my workaround on that typically is crazy workaround. We'll make that a icosahedron. Noseman was calling me out for the mispronunciation of that. I'm still not sure because that's the way it looks to me. Anyway, that gets a sphere, and that'll shrink down, clone the sphere onto an object. The object will be the shrinking sphere, so now you got a bunch of spheres. Clone as the polygon center, and now you can see that we got a bunch of spheres. It's really hard to escape a sphere, so we turn those spheres into a, I guess, a moving mesh, and dynamics are off. Those can also become pseudo-transparent, although transparency turns into whatever color that's outputting, so let's chill those out a bit. So those spheres will now be what's colliding. Hopefully they're not pre-colliding with it. Yeah, they are a little bit. So in the beginning, we'll set this radius up a bit bigger. Anyway, the spheres now are the thing that's doing the colliding. In fact, yeah, I already stole the collision tag off of this, so our main sphere is no longer dynamic. Only these outer spheres are. But you see, those are actually going to not allow them to escape. So it's actually scrunching them down without breaking it. So now make sure that those don't render. And I don't want to visually see them. So now you can see it's actually properly crunching them in. So depending on the way we do the turbulence, you can already see these bends are a lot cleaner. We can shrink that as small as we want to. And we'll make not too many because it's going to slow us down. I'll make a couple more. We'll decrease the count just a little bit to speed it up. A little more space between them. And then I'd like some randomness on them. I think that would go a long way. Randomness, maybe not in scale, but yeah, positional randomness goes a long way. Which one? I would think it'd be Y. Yeah, Y. So they're even now, but they each get offset just a little bit. And now if we run, oh my, why is it doing that? Were some pre-colliding? Maybe some were pre-colliding. I don't know why it suddenly exploded so badly. Frame. Now it's not exploding. I don't know what it didn't like about it, but now we scrunch in. Each one's doing its own thing, just ever so slightly. I think maybe increasing that turbulence back up again. Smaller, stronger. Exploding again. It's just decided that every other frame it's going to explode. Yeah, the little bit of turbulence gives it that little bit of extra initial chaos. And I think more overlapping on them, more wind. You just see how you could combine and combine and combine and combine and combine and do all sorts of crazy things. So anyway, those scrunch in, they do whatever they do. It looks pretty nonsensical out of the gate. My hope is that we can put that into a connect. This, I haven't saved it yet, so I'm going to rewind, save it. Cloth squish. Okay. Is it going to explode this time? Yep. Second time, not. Every other time it's going to explode. Oh, I might actually know why. Because remember, the dynamics aren't refreshing properly when we go to frame 0. Big pain in the butt. Anyway, that's getting scrunched. It doesn't look too good from the top, but from the bottom, you see we got a nice amount of dimension. If I put that into a connect... Yeah, okay, the connect was able to handle it. And then I'll do a subsurface there. We'll set that to 1, 1. That could then be fed into... We could sharpen the corners. I'm not going to worry about that. Cloth surface. No subdivisions. Yes, some thickness. And then take that entire thing. Well, I guess I would want those sharp edges, but we can throw that entire thing into another subdivision surface to get that final layer of rounding. And... we can start getting crazy layered up, like, you know, thickness on that. We don't need that second subdivision if we don't want. That could actually be coming from the first one. So I can really smooth that out and round it. And then you can see those nice sharp edges. The cloth surface can have whatever thickness. So yeah, I mean, it's not amazing, but I think there's just some overall abstractness going on. The even turning off the spheres for a frame or two, so these might straighten themselves out a bit, I think would go a long way. Just adding more layers, you can add set thicknesses. I could have made these closer together, but you know, as long as your dynamics are working, this is just going to layer everything up in fun, overlappy, but not passing through each other ways. I mean, that's my go-to for this. And yeah, definitely looks better underneath than above. And that's what I have to say about that. Burned Wolf. If you animate those clone spheres, you might get randomness in the paper. That's probably true. You gotta be careful. Like, you could make a whole random position on there, but one might catch the paper and then try and yank it through a different sphere. And if two of those spheres that are impossible to pass through crash into each other and text is in between, you're probably going to have them explode. So having something a little bit more uniform is safer. But yeah, just a little bit more randomness in one way or another. And, you know, maybe spinning the sheets of paper on each other would have been good. A little more spacing in between or away from them. And if we could have gotten that traction method working, which I'll have to look up from an old episode, that would have been cool as well. But yeah, just some nice layering up. I'll save that as a secondary version. You never know if it'll load up properly. But yeah, that should do that one. Yeah, the clone spheres is a super duper solid way to stop things from escaping. And I don't think I did, but I should have set the shape from moving mesh to sphere to ellipsoid, and that would be even like more solid calculation wise. Coral vibe, yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, animating the outer sphere a little bit might be okay. You don't want to go too far. And like, you know, I said, there's a lot of uniformity here. Like feeding in a sphere as the base shape was kind of boring because we're squishing it into a sphere shape. But if it wasn't a sphere shape and you're just compressing everything in, but making sure you have that a void inside of it. And again, if we got that proper attraction going, it would have been good. But still, cool looking shapes to explore in here. You know, it's like right there. That right, you know, zoom up, get some nice color on different layers and whatnot, and that's somebody's daily render. Anyway, let's see. Is there more questions? Does somebody have a question I didn't catch earlier? That was a repost there. Lots of chat going on, which is great. I tackled that one. Okay, I'm just waiting for a new question to pop up because I'm having to scroll back really far to the earlier questions. I am curious what episode. I don't even know how to go find the episode that would have been in. I'd have to look at the thumbnails of the episodes to figure out what the squishing attraction one was. But I'd love to open up that file. So let me go and do that. I'm going to open up the season 3 folder. I'm pretty sure it was season 3. It's going to be going back a ways, definitely before Noseman was a guest, before a guest was there. Episode 8 maybe? No. Episode 6 perhaps? Yeah, let's go into raw recordings, thumbnail. I remember that one, but not that one. Episode 4. Raw recordings. Oh, that turned into a tutorial. Nope, that's just my still. Must have put that in renders. Bloop. Hard to tell. But we've done a lot of episodes. Tricky to track down. Ooh, no, those are spines traveling around. Oh yeah, remember this crazy woolly, cloudy thing? That was cool. No, I mean, these are all neat projects, but none of them read as the self-collapsing. Oh, that's when we figured out the vacuum forming. That was cool. Mick had a question come in. What do you got? Mick's always Nice and quick with the questions. Computer science. Oh, that's an advertisement. I'm just going to let that go. Skip. Ooh. Oh, it's Nile Red. Everybody loves Nile Red. He does awesome chemistry videos. Let's see. What do you say? Any chance of creating this effect? Is this the... I'm not sure which one this is. Is this going to be like the burning snake? Yep. It's like the firework effect. I'm going to skip a few forward, yeah. I think it gets super... Like, look how like ridiculous it gets. Yeah, there's a lot of madness happening here. I mean, keep in mind there's several layers here where, like, you know, those break apart. And look, it's still growing. It's tendrils there. It's a lot of chaotic thing. Excuse me. So, yeah, very cool. It's like you're emitting something. But it needs to, it's got like a mechanical lock on what came before. I wonder to what degree that could even be just completely faked. Like, how, because, you know, what's crazy about that is it's in the real world. And it's like, whoa, look how crazy that looks. But if we, let's make a bowl. Here's a quickie technique for making a bowl. If you're curious, let's do 32. Make a spherify, drop it as a child, and scoot the spherify up. Bing, we got a bowl. 100%. And then that can get fed into claw surface. Ta-da. We got a bowl. Hide the deformer. And even move that up so it pivots approximately from the correct spot. Okay, so if actually, yeah, that would, we actually had a, how did I do that? There's a, when Rick was a guest, I think the previous season, somebody asked a crazy question and I was able to figure out the technique, and I'm gonna have to see if I can refigure out the technique. So to begin with, well, let's just do a helix to give us a base, and then make a random field. Nope, random effector. Random effector. And make that deform the points, which is going to make it super crazy. But if I say it's noise-based, and deform only on Z, on Y. Let's see, what do we got? Is that good? No animation speed. Change the scale. Yeah, okay, so I want to do something like that, but more. Oh, let's also deform it via the effector. There we go. That pushes straight up. Cool. So now we can change the scale. And then I make a duplicate. And now we say that this is... Oh, yeah, but you can't change the seed. Now we'll do 150 on a different axis. And I'll have to just change the global scale as a way of doing seed. And now we'll do a third time. Make that one a little bit smaller. And we'll go on the third axis. Okay, so you can see we've got all those crazy squigglies going. I mean, we could have done that in a lot of different ways. Let's see, which is causing that overlap? You gotta be careful with this triple layering. You can get weird ones. Okay, there we go. That's pretty good. Okay, so let's say that's our crazy spline. And indeed, it is a crazy spline. I will bake that into a connect, which may not be treated as a spline, which is a slight worry, but I'll just anticipating it. I'm immediately going to put in a spline mask, which should force it to be acknowledged as a spline. How did we do this? I'm going to save it right away. growth stuck in place. Okay, how do we do this? Now, there is going, let's make, I want to make it visual, so let's make a cube. And we'll make the cube red, just so everybody can see it nice and clearly. This little cube wants to get aligned to splined onto the spline mask. Not working. It's not acknowledging the spline mask. Let's see if it will acknowledge the connect. No, it won't acknowledge the connect. Of course it won't. If it doesn't like that, it doesn't like that. You know what? We just bake it down. We just bake it down. This is a perfect chance to use a recall, just in case. Group that up, and then make that editable. It forces it to be a spline, and the instant that we made it editable, you see it does acknowledge it. Okay, so you see it suddenly snapped. We also want it, very important, to make it tangential, so it's actually aligning with it. That now exists in a particular space. If we counter place that, it might live a frame behind. How do I do this again? That cube is there, and now I want that cube to move onto the base, or at least the equivalent of it. The cube could be a child of nothing. That gives us a position. This is a position and a rotation. So if we do the opposite. Oh, how did we do this? Anybody was saying it dropped. I don't know if it dropped, but it's still going. For me, it doesn't say the stream ended. How do I counter animate that? It's not trivial. I want that to zero out. It's a weird thing, but if we can get it working. We did this with a tail. Apologies, give me a moment. If we... It'd have to probably be a duplicate. And I'm gonna make a duplicate of the cube just to keep it. But then it can't just be a child of it. Unless it can, I don't know. If it's a child and it moves there, but then we then force it back to zero, but I don't think that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. We'd have to counter animate it. And the last time, we definitely used Espresso in the example we did with Rick. That calculates after. Of course, this doesn't calculate. No, it does go at zero. Tell that to transform to the null, which is at zero. But that doesn't seem to have done much. Yeah, that just moves everything. I'd have to counter move. Oh man, that's a tricky one. Is it though? I think you just have to take the, is it the value or the inverse of the value? I'm just not remembering the technique because it would be a static chain, which would be cool, but you need it. I need wherever that cube moved to. I need that to get zeroed out with this moved there. Yeah, there's some espresso involved to invert the directions. I think we might have even used a Mo spline last time for some reason. Maybe that created the growth. Dang it. I almost have it, but I don't quite. And I don't want to spend any more time just blankly staring at it. Maybe we can squeeze one more question in. Or perhaps we can think of a completely different way of doing it. That's the problem, though, is like you want the crazy shape, and the crazy shape travels through. Sorry, I can't think of a different technique than kind of the one we were aiming for. Zero that out. They'd have to have the same axis. There's only one part that's throwing me off. If they had the same, if it's a child, it would have to travel backwards. Yeah, so it'd have to be a child of this cube, and while it's a child, it would look identical. How would I do that? I just had a small thought. If that cube, yeah, that cube is traveling around doing its own thing. If there's a different null, and that null is doing the exact same thing, so the null is doing the same thing. Those two will have to be animated, but let's not worry about that yet. Oh, can't put it as a child of itself. Duplicate. That would move. Dang, nope, that didn't work. I thought I had something. Crossfader with a stacking objects question. Well, I'm stumped on this one. I don't want to spend any more time. I know you, Crossfader, I think you've asked stacking objects questions before. Let's see what we got. 9 seconds in. I'll move it over on the screen in a second. Just want to make sure there's no... Oh, yes. Let's see what we got. Okay, so pretty cool stuff. It looks like it's some sort of investing all spots. Oh, Sakani. Sakani made this. Yeah, he's a great guy. Anyway, the animation we see here is a bunch of individual little chunks building up this crazy shape at the end, which is very cool. So my thought there, well, let's see. What's funny is the part I'm not sure about is how do we make it form this shape. Never mind. I think I know how to make it form that shape. Yeah, because look, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rings. For a second, I thought it was a big old volume, but it's not. So, if we make a... Yeah, let's keep it simple. Cylinder, height of 20, radius of 100. I type too quickly sometimes and it doesn't acknowledge. I saw the 1 go in and it disappeared. Turn off caps. Okay, I would like this to be evenly subdivided. We'll do 5 and then increase until those look square-ish. Okay, so that's a thought. We do something like that. Actually, it might be a little dense for a live stream, so chill those out just a bit. Okay. Maybe we'd have to manually explode them. I don't know. The here's the thought. If I were to, how does this work actually? If I make a selection tag, we're in some uncharted territory here. So here's a selection tag. Selection tag will use fields. The field will just be a simple noise. The unfortunate thing is you don't see it live. Actually, that's true. We don't see it live unless you double click and now you see how it updates. But I bet you that we could just assign it to a material and now we will see it live. Excellent. Okay. So, random noise. Yeah, this is going to work nicely, at least this part. It's not going to be as parametric as I might want it to be, but now you can see it's got a good scale to it. So doing that, I can say remapping, and I don't want it to do as much, so we can just go to a curve, and I can increase or decrease this. So yeah, see, those are good sized chunks. So yeah, that's perfectly fine. So let's just call that 1 if it works. I don't know if this will work, but now let's make a second one. Wait, why did it disappear? Oh, because I changed the name. Material tag 1. Okay. Duplicate that. Can we, I want the random field, but can I feed this tag in as a reference? It says nearest. I'm going to say index. Make another material. Apply said material. Name this number 2. Feed that in. And limit to change the color. Okay, now we have a secondary layer that will require a second field. 1, 2. This one refers to field or random 2. So that gets a different seed. And can I drag this one up and say subtract? Yes. So now it is not going to have any of the first layer applied, and we just need to do this a few times until we've got a good distribution. That's the idea. Now we need this to have more because I want there to be approximately the same visual amount. It's good enough for me. Make another one. 3. Keep in mind, I'm trying to make this somewhat parametric. If you made it less parametric, I think it would work even quicker. 3. Three has a different seed. 3 is still a field being fed number 3, getting tag 1 and tag 2, which should probably go into a folder. Easy there, folder. What just happened? I feel like something slightly buggy just happened. But if I take these 2 and add them together and then subtract the result, yeah, those 2 add, then subtract. However, whoa. Yeah, this tag, no, 2 contains 1, but 2 just lost 1. So take that and subtract it again. That had something to do with the way it kind of freaked out and combined things in a weird way. I've now repaired it. Anyway, this one also has its own unique seed. And I drag this up until it gets enough of the remainder. And then we have our third one, which technically I think will be our first one. And that will just be everything that doesn't get a tag. So now we got 4 different colors kind of parametrically selected. I wonder if there'd be a way. I can think of simpler ways to do that. And maybe we should do it in a simpler way. Like, that was fairly complex and a little bit hard to get individual control of. So in spite of, like, it does a fine technique. I wouldn't knock anybody who built it that way. Let's see if we can make it slightly cleaner. Advanced field selections. We'll just call it that for now. Okay. Here's the thought. Simplify, simplify, simplify. These tags are all still doing their thing. Let's start with the outermost one. Delete the folder. I don't need that. Here's the thought. That is a random field. First things first. Make a group field and feed the random into it. That way I can use this group field to feed in the source. So yeah, now there's a group field in here. And that means I can change this one and all of them will update. It's just a good idea to do. Now, I need that to show a full spectrum. This is not going to do a good job of showing me a full spectrum. The remapping needs to be correct, which is mostly done through here. If I give it a fuller range, the best we can do is kind of make sure that we get a solid range of both. That's all I can. I'm just going to guess at it. Okay. Assuming that we're getting a full spectrum from white to black, even if we're not, I think it'd still kind of work. Now, can we? Well, we can. But I was wondering if there's a slightly more dynamic way, because the quantize, we could split it into 4 distinct pieces. That might make it easier to select them. But we might be able to just go straight into the curve. So if we really sharpen up this curve to the point where essentially there is none, the hope is we can just divide this into quarters. So that would be 7.5. So that'd be 25% of it right there would be getting taken up by that tag. So save time, I'll copy that, go into this one. That's the final one. I guess I should have. Okay. Keep it simple. Same idea, but right now we're just going from green, and now we're seeing some of the yellow. Just fine. Now, let's move on and say that this one is getting tag 2. Tag 2 has the same information, except the curve doesn't care about that as much as it cares about going from 50% up, across, and down. What's the best way to make that have no handles? Yeah. Up. And then down at 75. So you see I'm essentially capturing the second 25%. That's the idea. And then we capture the third 25%, which I'll copy this one. Copy. Paste. And pull this down to 25%. And go up to 50%. And that's the third one. Assign it. And yeah, actually, that's pretty good distribution. So here's the point. By doing it that way, now all of these are just referencing 25%. There might have been a more elegant way of doing that than this curve, but it worked. Now, for a somewhat tricky thing, this gives us the correct selection tags. I don't know if I can push it much further than that. Like, how do we break something apart based on selection tags? I don't know that we do. Maybe we can. Let me think. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, we can do this. I mean, if we have to do it manually, we will. But this is a nice automatic creator if we need it. Oh yeah, and then the bigger point here is if I change this random seed, you see that the entire rig updates. I don't have to keep on like redoing. So we can do any tweaks we want to this selection, and you can see we get these nice random shapes generating from it. That's the point. How do we melt this pretty well? I don't think that gives us the result I want. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I kind of don't think it does, though. If I do a poly effects, I'll save that. Poly effects, transform object, partial polygon, full polygon. I'm pretty sure we can. Maybe let's do a bevel. That's weird. Kind of interesting. Doesn't make sense. I don't know. So if I change this to polygon mode, then you see we get this giant extrusion, but we can limit it to a selection. So now you can see that I'm extruding those individual ones out, which is cool. Is there going to be a way of keeping only those? That's my question. There might be. We're going way out of our way here, but it's fun to build a parametric rig, so bear with me. 0.001 for the extrusion, which is fine, and then that's extruding out 10. I'm also fine with that. So that's one bevel. Does a second bevel enable us to properly extrude the next one? Yes, it does. And now a third one. I should have done these in reverse order. We'll do that extrusion. Oops, that extrusion. So we get the third one, and I didn't make a selection tag for the remaining one. Ooh, and there's, oh, that makes sense. I got some overlap. I have to very carefully make sure that they don't overlap, because if they overlap, we'll get these double extrudes. But I do have a plan here. So yeah, I think this is gonna work well. It's gonna be weird, but it's gonna work. Okay. Think. We need these to be, I was kind of eyeballing it, but we need them to be pretty dang precise. So I'm going to reset that so that's not curved. And I'm going to eyeball again. We'll see if it's good enough, but it might not even be this one. That's the problem. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be. Now what we could do is under to it. Like if we intentionally kind of miss a little bit, and then this one, let's make, yeah, that's already slightly below, but that has got some overlap. And then that one, yeah, that definitely has some overlap. In theory, no, there's still a few little remainders there, but I thought I had moved that far enough over where there shouldn't be any doubling ups. If there's no, that's definitely a little bit to the left. Oh, that one's not. There we go. Ah, okay, so I might be missing some. So those selections make sense. The green one doesn't have a selection tag, but the green could be the remainder. So if I duplicate this, I'll set this to 4. It's fine. 4 as a tag will be merely, it'll be everything. Does it do everything by default? How do you select all? Probably a solid. That's 4. Limit it. And yeah, you see everything. Let's simplify. Everything's green, which means this solid is saying, hey, everything's selected. It looks like everything's actually selected by default. So if I now feed in, let's make a folder. In the folder, I will say, I want that one and that one. Oh, that makes sense. 1, 2, 3. There's 4. Limit to 4. How do I get 2 3s? 3, 2, 1. Add, Subtract. Solid. Don't go in the folder. Normal, subtract, add, subtract. Normal? No. Screen? No. Max. Min. If this is a selection of everything and we're taking the other selection tags and then saying deselect. First of all, let's select. Are those the selection tags? Why is it not giving me any properties? Why is it only giving me properties on the top one? I want it to literally be the index. Give me the properties. Why? Look, if I click on 1, it gives me the properties. If I click on 2, it doesn't give me the properties. And they're just selection tags. We're going to... Oh, and now it doesn't let me delete them. Not encouraging. I tell you, something's coded wrong with these folders. All right, we're going to try that again. Maybe we can just not do the folder. So this is 1. I want the literal index. Subtract. Two, or that's 3. That's fine. Let's do them in order. That's 1, 2. Literal index. Subtract. 3. Literal index. Subtract. It's not quite the result I was looking for. Maybe it needs all of it selected. So if I select all and we set the base freeze. So let me turn off, off, off. That's everything. Create a freeze. I almost never use them, but now that freeze should freeze. And now it's a selection of everything that we currently have. So can I do that? Now it's not letting me delete the solid. It doesn't really matter. The freeze is overriding it, but it's still doing that same thing. Yeah. Shaffic. Yeah, I could try inverting instead of subtracting. I don't know if I trust that, but it's worth a try. It's completely freaking out. So I want to just reset this. Reset all. Okay. Use fields. Let's try your idea. That's a fine idea. And then you know what? Just for clarity, visual clarity, we'll make a blank white material, drop it here, and now we're only seeing the result of green. So now it's white, and then the green is the remainder. So we've got this brand new tag 4. I want to take this one. I would like the literal index. But yeah, already, if that was the literal index and it's feeding it in, and this is overriding on top of, that is set to, oh, this tag got renamed. Oh, when I said reset, it must have reset everything. So yeah, okay, there's 4, and now, okay, that seems correct. Like, that is now that singular selection. So now let's bring in the next one. So that's 2. I want it to be the literal index. And let's see if we can add those together. Okay, also good. Add in 3. Literal index. Also add. So are those the remainders? I don't know. Can we now invert? Yes, that did invert. So pulling out the white material. No, but see, that's not the remainders. We might miss a few. The kind of dumb method would be, let's just make this the last 25%. We can always possibly clean up the math. Paste. So that overrides, and now let's just grab the first 25%. Now we are going to miss the occasional one, and unless we are, well, the more time we spend, if we make it mathematically perfect, I think it could work really well. So that would be exactly at 0.25. And then this should be at 0.249. So just a hair before it. In fact, it's not even drawing the line, even though I think it should. I'm going to assume that the line's there because the selection is there. So let's just spend the extra second and try and make these very clean. So that is at 2. The other one was at 2.5, right? So this will be at 2.51. I mean, if it is 2.5, well, we get the overlaps if it is identical. So we'll see if we end up getting the doubles. Or do we just skip the one? If we skip one, then we might miss a selection. So I'll take the risk. This is supposed to go up to 499. And this is supposed to go to 5. Cool. So that was that one, and that's the next one. So the next one is also 5. That's 501. This is 0.749. That is 7.5. So now it's up, down, and up. And then the last one, easy one of 0.75 to 0.51. Well, look, we're missing because of just the imprecision of like that 0.01. There's going to occasionally be a missing one. This is our attempt to stay parametric. I'm going to just call it good enough. We're going to miss a couple. Potentially, we could squeak those back. But I'm going to call it there. We don't want to spend any more time. So that's an extrusion, that's an extrusion, that's an extrusion. And now we do have a fourth selection. So I'll make another. And that one will be the fourth. So now, virtually everything's getting extruded. Now what's cool is that these bevels are, well, they are barely offset. We could potentially put a smaller number. I don't think you're allowed to do 0, but they are still grouped. You see these are still groups of individual polygons. So if this works, I don't know if it will. We'll give that a save. I would like, after all of that happens, I want to erase out everything that we don't need. And to do that, we will use a MoGraph PolyFX, which is another polygon effector. I will move that as the last thing to happen. What do I want it to do? I want to scale everything to -1. -1, -1, -1. I kind of feel like that should have done something. Unless 0 is something. Okay, sorry, it's supposed to be 0. I think I inverted everything. Okay, so that's now scaling everything down to 0, which pretty much means everything goes away. However, we're in a very specific shape here. So if we put in a fall off of a cylinder field, we should hopefully be able to set a radius. Why is it not showing? Set radius. Okay, there it is. Okay, so increase. Oh yeah, we just have one radius. So if I push that out just enough, and we have fall off, so let's crank up the fall off. That went a little funky. I think I understand why that's happening, but we don't want it to happen because it's erasing everything that was part of it. Oh, come on, we were so close. How do we do this properly? How do I make everything but the outer ring? I want everything to disappear except for the outermost polygons. I thought we could do that with a PolyFX, but that seems to erase out anything connected with said polygon. Maybe we can do a double bevel. Yeah, that's an idea. We'll do a subdivision there, so you see we get this extra one. What happens then? point. I think it's the same idea, different problem. Yeah, it's going to do the same thing again. How can I stop that from happening? Because we need to kind of explode those. What's funny is this would actually have been a really good example to try and go into the neutron or the nodes, the scene nodes. Would have been a pretty good example for that. It actually probably would have been pretty easy to do now that I think about it. But then we wouldn't bring it back into cinema very well. So I'm still fine exploring it this way. What else? What other options do we even have? I can explode everything, but it's not going to preserve the Phong groups. Although, that's a weird idea, but maybe. Grab the bevels. And grab something weird like the actually, yeah, would something simple like the this actually might work. It's weird, but it's a simpler method. Where the heck is the explode? There it is, explosion. Okay, explosion is going to super explode those away. I'm going to say speed of 0, angle of 0, end size of 1. Well, no, end size of 0. So you see everything shrinks. But now let's give... Oh, no, it doesn't have a fall off. Dang. Maybe we can do it with a limiting tag. Or what is it, a restriction tag? Restriction tag. Restrict. Nope. Dang. Explosion. You're supposed to do it. What about explosion effects? Does that have... They did not add fall off into this as well. They do, I think, have use selection tags. So maybe that'll do something. Well, that did something. The selection tags are flying away. What? Okay, so 0 gravity. I'm not sure why they're doubling up. Because they have a thickness. Okay. Are those considered separate? Not yet. Okay, we're almost there though. The time can be small. The clusters we don't want to do anything with. The explosion, we need a little bit of strength, don't we? Okay, okay, check that out. See if I do this, do you see how their individual polygon groups have now disconnected? So if we set that to something small like 0.001, those polygon groups visually haven't really moved away, but they've now disconnected in theory. If they've disconnected, the poly effects can run on the disconnected pieces. Aha! Okay, took a couple tries, but we did get one to work. Okay, those are now disconnected. We've now gone through all that work and we've got these exploded pieces. As I said, that was kind of an exercise in the challenge of it, because obviously there are simpler ways we could have done those selections. Anyway, yes, cool. That finally worked. Meaning, let's give these thickness. So it's the end result of those. So let's not subdivide, but I will push those out, which will give them all proper volume. They are each individual segments, but they're not exploded. So if we want to explode, we well, actually, now that I think about it, maybe the volume builder definitely will. But let's try using the fracture. No, let's use the Voronoi. Why not? If we drop this in the Voronoi fracture, and we, okay. Wait, is that treating it as one chunk? I thought those exploded out pieces. Okay, strangely, I just put it in, it didn't work, but I put it into a connect object, and it did work. So we need a Phong tag. Boop. Okay, cool. Now, every one of those pieces has exploded out into its own little piece. At least in theory it has. The connect, turn off weld. There we go. Now, now those selection tags have exploded out into each individual piece. They are now inside of a fracture object, enabling them to each do their own thing, meaning we should be able to do things like start feeding in. Let's try a push apart to start out with. No. So push apart effector should just push apart as advertised. So yeah, those will now push those each apart doing their own thing. So yeah, now we've kind of got a super duper parametric explodey thing that we have individual pieces that we can make them do whatever we want. Now for the actual animation, these are each individual pieces now, or at least they're going to be counted as such. There's some slight intersecting. That is actually, we can probably get around that. Well, first of all, there's a bunch of things we can do. These are pushing out really far. We don't need those to push out as far. So bevels, you can push out like very little. So I'll say 1. They're all going to disappear, but that's because our cylinder is too big of a radius now. Eventually they'll pop back in again. Maybe. You know what? Let's just not mess with that. Okay, they're back. But what I do want to do is make sure that those pieces have a little bit of spacing between them. And I think we do that in the explosion. Right, I put that really tiny offset, but let's put a reasonable offset on them. If I say 1, yeah, if I say 1, now you see they all separate a bunch. So whatever number we put in here, say 0.1, now there is actually spacing in between them, so they shouldn't be colliding anymore. Okay, cool. So now that that is happening, and we got a lot of options. The give that a save. Will the cloth subdivide it nicely? No, it doesn't do the midpoint one, so we need another cloth after the fact. So let's leave it simple. But let's just get to the meat of this. And pretty much from this point now, we have this parametric ring, and we could make several layers of it, but let's keep it simple for now. Let's add a rigid body, gravity, expert, no, general 0, dynamic. It's applying tag to children. Carefully, we'll hit 1. Okay, they're going to explode apart, but it ran quick. That's happening because it's automatic, but we need it to be a moving mesh. And now if I hit 1 frame forward, oh, they're still exploding, but there might be ways to fix it. But yeah, we can see them all explode apart, which is cool. Actually, it runs really well, too. Neat. That's a moving mesh. It's got a size increment that's all pretty small. So if we go under expert, maybe it's this collision margin. So let's set that to 0.1 and see if it explodes less. No, that's all we needed. So the collision margin was the culprit there. Now we could just use, I'm going dynamic route, but keep in mind you could just do this with effectors. We could just make things drift apart with effectors. But if you're going to go the dynamic route, then you're going to have to probably bake it and reverse it, but let's make that happen. So the thought is, let's do several things. I could do an attractor. What I would love to do is a force with a fall off. I don't think, forces don't have fall off, unfortunately. It'd be kind of cool if they were pushed apart from each other. I wonder if they could push apart from each other. Let's experiment there. We're learning new things. Let's set this matrix to object. The object will be the fracture object. And I'm going to tell it that I want it to be based off the axis. So it's going to create exactly what it should be doing. They're really big. Let's set these to 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. See if it's doing something all right. Okay, now they're really tiny. Why is it? Oh, I set to 0. Okay, now it's hiccuping. Maybe setting it to 0 did that, but it seems to. Oh, it just woke up. 0.1. Okay. It seems to be. There's way too many matrices. That doesn't seem to be properly placing them in the axis that I want them to. So let's just ignore that. Okay, I keep on trying to go fancy. We've already spent a lot of time on this one, and we're already over. So I'm going to go back to simplifying. Most straightforward way. Let's do a particle turbulence with a fall off, because those do have fall offs. I'll say 25, which is not super strong. We'll give it a decent size, a little bit of frequency, and let's just make a spherical field. So we got a lovely little spherical field here. And let's give ourselves, I don't know, 200 frames, 300 frames. Turbulence, keyframe. We'll have this slowly drift in over those frames. I'll just have it go to about there. Why did I keyframe the size? I don't want to keyframe the size. I want to keyframe the X. frame 130. It's traveled in. Keyframe. That's just some turbulence. Everything should be pretty much static. Maybe there's some drifting, I'm not sure. But as soon as the turbulence starts entering the field, all of those will be like, I'm out of here. Whee! So yeah, you do that, and everything breaks apart. So actually, and it is working shockingly well, to the point where I wonder, is that a terrible idea? If this field was outside of it, I wonder if we could make a cloner to make several levels of it automatically. We probably shouldn't. But anyway, those are drifting apart. So honestly, we probably only need 150 frames. Okay, so now let's bake it. Dynamics, condition, let's say general. I'm just going to say controller command D. Under cache, we'll just bake all, which here you saw I was running fast, so this bake won't take very long. Done. Okay, so now in theory I should be able to just scrub forward and backward, and you see it's breaking apart however I want to. And keep in mind, that's just a turbulence going, so we could shrink the turbulence, we could raise the size of the turbulence. But the point being is you can now see I can scrub backwards, and we can get all of these going like back to where they belong, back in the beginning. I kind of would like to make, that's a small, that turbulence is really big because it's going well. Why don't we shrink that up a little bit? Actually, we can shrink it up a decent amount, and let's double the frequency. The strength was fine though. So Control D, clear cache. It plays in not real time, but fast. So let's hit play and see what we get. Clear cache. Spherical field, go. Yeah, definitely a little more random. Oop, nah, it's pushing inward more than I wanted it to. I mean, they will return there. Okay, well, just for fun, we could make a second spherical field, and that one's not going to move. And I'll reset the PSR to this point, and now let's enlarge that so that those are going to push outward, and let's see what that does. So make sure that this one, we'll just call that one push inside of turbulence. We'll make sure that that is also included. For now, I'll set it to add, and in fact, we'll just turn that off. So let's see if they'll start pushing out right away. Oh yeah, it's turbulence. Whoops. Yeah, I'm treating this like it's a field force. It's not a field force. Okay, this... yeah, we should have just done a field force to start out with. Okay, field force, keep it simple. 25 was a good number, 25. What is it going to do? It's going to push out. It's also going to get a spherical field that will eventually become a mask. Turbulence, go away. Field force. Move those as children of the field force. Field force, you've now been fed those. The push out should be pushing out, possibly in. Let's hit play. Okay, it is set to in, so we'll push out. So push, direction, invert. Now you'll see that that's going to push outward just fine. It's very strong, so I'll set the scale down so that's only like 20% of the power. So you see that's pushing everything out just fine. Now, inside of that, I can mask that. I can add a mask and say, hey, you're masked out by this other spherical field. So that can't push out unless this other one passes into the same frame. So as that begins to overlap, that is now able to push out. And yeah, you see those explode really nicely. Now, if we wanted some chaos on top of it, we can do something like a random field, which is already set to noise. We'll give it a little animation speed. And that can get the same mask, so I'll just add a mask onto that. We'll set that to add, and yes, it does affect the direction. The scale should be pretty big, and we can just drag that same spherical field in a second time as a reference, and that will mask out both of them. There's different ways we could have done that, but now nothing should be having any effect until this spherical field begins to push in, and now there's an outward force pushing distinctly outward, but there's also some random to randomly push them around. So yeah, you see there's a little bit more personality to it, but they mostly push out, which is what I wanted. The field force takes a little longer to calculate. There's just more happening, but that's doing a fine job of them drifting apart. Let's just call that good, save it, Control D, bake the dynamics. Take a little bit longer, but not much more. Yeah, definitely a little bit longer. I haven't done the baked cache in a while. Remember we did the exploding tree tutorial? And that was originally a question in the live stream. So we got to do a similar thing. But anyway, that should be cached now, so I should be able to frame forward and backwards. So I can drag backward, and you see it just building itself on. So now it's building itself on. How do we remap that? Well, inside the dynamics tag, there's a cache. Maybe we can't do it there. Is it inside of the global dynamics? Yeah, here's playback time. Use playback time. So now, how does that? Yeah, so now you can see I can drag this, and that becomes the time. So we should be able to keyframe that. So this is a 150 frame animation. If I hit Control D, oh yeah, we're already in Control D. Under key interpolation, I can say I want it to be linear, so it's not adding easing in and easing out. So under dynamics, I can say at the very beginning, we are actually at frame 150, which is the last frame. Keyframe that. And then at the very end, I'll say, actually, now we're at frame 0. So I've now reversed the time with any luck. So if I hit play now, there we go. That's all we had to do. So now that's baked, and that's now reversing, and everything goes back to its final position all by itself. And aside from having the initial cylinder become parametric, the entire, or besides the initial cylinder having been made editable, everything here is parametric. We could change any property and then rebake it and then get this to rebuild in some alternative way. And yeah, that's doing a fine job of building on. It is baked. I wonder if we can add any effects on top of this. I'll save this as C. It'll be a little bit larger because of all the baking. So maybe I'll include, maybe I won't. In fact, let's see how big it is. Yeah, it went from 400 kilobytes to 29,000. So baking will do that. Anyway, with that baked, can I feed this into a cloth field? I do want to subdivide, but it's super, well, we don't necessarily need the colors. Although the colors are kind of neat. Yeah, this would kill the colors off. So we'd have to do this beforehand, which would take longer to calculate the dynamics. But factor, if I say 0, does it become sharp? Yeah. So now you see I've subdivided it by putting it into a cloth surface. So we get an extra subdivision. And the reason to do that is if we feed that into a subdivision surface, it's going to be kind of a, you see it's kind of, it still maintains its kind of square-ish shape. And now we get those kind of, these blocks looking a lot like the reference. So if we go here, you can see that these have similar-ish shapes to it. And I don't know if it's going to remember the baked animation. It's still going to take a while to calculate one way or the other. Maybe. Oh, yeah, okay, cool. It does still work. So we lost the color by putting the cloth in earlier. Keep in mind, you could take the subdivision surface and the cloth surface and put it in earlier. And then the fracture would be running on these smoothed out pieces. But I bet you a third-party renderer could like round them out after the fact if you were doing it that way. But I was just throwing that out there that you could also round them out that way. But yeah, these obviously are assigning color. And yeah, the reverse animation, we're even getting nice twists from the parts. And adding in extra rings on this would be pretty trivial. You could just duplicate the rig. Possibly you could put the rig into a cloner and make more of them that way. I don't know for sure that that would work, but I feel like there's a good chance it would. And yeah, that can be pushed as far as you want. So yeah, really cool question. I decided to take it extra complex and try and make it parametric. We could have just made a couple of quick selections and then baked it out and made it editable. And then they would have been like, okay, cool, done. But instead we made it parametric. And just to throw it out there, I'll save that again. If we unbake everything, Control D, clear the cache, I should be able to like pay attention to the colors and the layout. We should be able to go back to this original noise and give it a different seed. And it's going to have to filter all the way through the entire system. Come on, do it. We might have to turn some of these things on and off in order. Well, I'm going to turn those off temporarily, and let's see. Yeah, so you can see here, I can just, all the effort we did makes it so that we can just go through and do different random seeds and different noises. And so if I were inclined, we could make this noise a lot taller, and now we should get some, yeah, now they feel very vertical, but we could also shrink that down thinner. And now in general, they're going to feel a little bit more horizontal, especially if you make the overall size bigger. Yeah, so now we get very horizontal size pieces. So by building it parametrically, you see that we do get extra power to be able to make these types of changes. And I love building that type of rig. And yeah, all that would be fine. And now it just doesn't refresh quickly or accurately if we don't turn those off, or if these weren't off, but now I can turn that off, bake that down in one object, turn on the Voronoi, and there's so few of them that that's probably going to run pretty good. Actually, it's probably almost exactly the same polygon count, so speed's probably not going to change much. But it's not baked, so as soon as this spherical field drifts in, those pieces will drift away. So the whole rig can be updated in that super trivial, quick way. It's even breaking the other parts apart, which is cool. So this would reverse very nicely. And I don't know if it will work, but because it's so easy to do, what would happen if we did try and put that into a cloner? And I want it to be a linear cloner with only one clone. And let's set this to 90. Oh, sorry, 2 clones. And don't offset. So now you see I've got a second one on the inside. So it's identical right now. If we take that out, does it change it? Are they identical? They might be. Seems like they're identical. I'm trying to think of how we could make them be different. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe the noise. Oh, that gets scaled after the fact. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the only thing I can think of, if we leave this as a child in it, then we could put 2 copies of it, and then if we say one of them has a drastically different seed, and then in the cloner we set this to blend mode, then it should, in theory, yeah, it should blend between each one, and each one gets its own unique seed. So those, we needed 2 copies of the hierarchy, but now I should be able to make more layers. Oh, is it not blending properly? Doesn't seem to be blending properly. Like you see we have 2 layers, but it's not blending. I set it to blend. Well, there must be some limitation to the way we're layering these up. Something it doesn't like about it. But, well, in any case, you saw that I could do 2 layers. Or, oh, actually, you know what's a better process here? Would be, yeah, we'd have to bake it down no matter what. Yeah, I'd have to bake it down no matter what. I wanted to do a cloner process, but keep in mind, we could just go to the original geometry, which is that. And what's the best way to do this? Let's say clone. I haven't done the clone in a while. Clone, 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 clone. I want to do a single clone, and I'm not even going to do anything. Let's just say apply. It should just select new clone. If I turn off Y, you can see I've now duplicated the geometry. Now I've got a second one. And then we could clone again. Well, let's just do the one because it's fine. But now that should just update overall because it's all the same stuff, hopefully. Oh, I can't do it that way. There's so many limitations or things you have to keep in mind. The cloner process worked better, so maybe just making duplicates is the best way. The reason I couldn't do that is the fall off. This cylinder field was erasing it out because it was too far inside of its cylinder. So doing this copy of it is better. Yeah, so... sorry about that limitation. But anyway, we can, this is still pretty dang parametric. And now you see I got 2 different layouts on it. And that should be able to go into a cloth. That'll get thickness, put that into a connect. It gets baked down, put that into the fracture. It fractures apart. And it's going to go twice as slow because there's double the pieces. But if I hit play, that should just work. If we built the rig slightly differently, we could probably make it be able to handle more, but something in the hierarchy, it doesn't like it. I don't know. But yeah, now you see we got double layers, so that would work just as well. Whee! Okay, I've been talking about this one way too long. Okay, that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. If you like this content, I've got some live streams. Right now, I'm trying to get this product out, so the bonus live streams are on pause for the next week or 2, but there's usually a bonus stream on Tuesdays, a bonus stream on Thursdays. There are scene files from those and from the regular Rocket Lasso Lives. If you do join Patreon, you get coupon codes for plugins, including the 2 plugins we already have out, Recall and Ricochet. Hopefully, as I said, there should be a new plugin in a week. If it ends up being delayed because we find some bugs or something, it's delayed, but I want to make sure it's a good tool before we launch it. So yeah, make sure you're on the newsletter. Let me put a couple links up for important things for everybody to go and hang out on. First of all, if you want to support and get discounts on the upcoming tools and get scene files, you can go ahead and head to Patreon. And if that isn't doing anything for you, you can go to rocketlasso.com and do 2 important things. Rocketlasso.com. Let me pull that up on the screen. Boop. So if you go to rocketlasso.com, 2 important things to do. One would be, here's some links. One would be you can scroll down to the bottom and there's a newsletter. If you click on that, you can put your email in, and I only send out these when there's like a new season of Rocket Lasso Live or a new plugin comes out, and usually there's like discount codes and things in there. So definitely sign up for the newsletter. And the other important one is you can click on community or click on community and head on over. Oh, I should be showing the screen, shouldn't I? Yeah, go to rocketlasso.com, and on the main page, you can scroll to the bottom and click on the newsletter, and here you can put in that and get information. And then otherwise you can click on join Slack, or you can scroll up here and click on community, or click on community and go to the community page. Click on sign me up for Slack, and you can come and hang out with everybody from the Slack channel, where there's cool weekly and monthly contests and challenges, and a lot of people who here in the chat are like regulars inside of there. So definitely give that a go. But in any case, that will wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging out, and I'll see you next week for hopefully a product launch. That'll do it. Bye bye, everybody.